Let's call this meeting to order at 7:02. You have to take notes. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have tonight a special meeting for the Board of Education. Main topic is to discuss the reductions to the budget request for this year. But before we get into that, we did leave off of the agenda an audience of citizens, so I would like to propose that we add, make a motion to add a audience of citizens to tonight's agenda. So we have some people here tonight, perhaps they want to speak, I don't know, but that's up there. I have a motion by Carrie, second by Adam, all in favor?
Aye.
I think that's 7-0. So with that, we will go to audience of citizens. Anyone like to address the Board of Education this evening in this meeting?
You pick me.
Oh, there's a sign up?
There is a sign up,
Are you on it?
but I
You're the
am.
only?
Fire away, John, you're up.
Someone who was brave enough too, so do I stand or I sit?
You can do either or, you certainly can
Let
sit.
me,
John, just for the record, because I haven't committed it to
yes,
Maria.
yes, I was connected to Allison and John Richards. I live at 239 Hoffman Drive in the Loveburg of Berlin.
Thank you.
And am a member of the Board of Finance. I serve as the designated liaison to the Board of Ed, and wanted a clarification on a couple of items. First would be the purpose of audience of citizens, which typically is to talk about things that are not directly on your agenda, because you're going to talk about things on your agenda. So I'm here, even though you said the word budget, I'm here to talk about things that are in Department 61, which is on the town side of the budget, which deals with the schools, to try to get some clarification if I could.
Fair enough, we actually kind of all lump it together, so that is on our discussion tonight as well.
Well, that's fair, and if you wanted to hear this later, that could be done as well. The point is that the Board of Ed's operational budget does not include, at the moment, the school security component. And if I may, because I'm just trying to follow things, it seems to be a bumpy road and things done very quickly at possibly the 11th hour. There was a value in the town side, $400,000, that the Board of Finance moved to the operational budget and then moved back. But the purpose was for, quote, security, unquote. First of all, I've not seen a detailed listing of what the town manager provided for any breakdown of that $400,000, so I'm asking if the Board of Ed has seen such a listing.
The $400,000 that was listed in Department 61 was a, lack of a better term, a lump sum based on some estimates for what we were looking for initially. Now, what we voted for was $575,000, I think, somewhere around
We'll
there.
talk about that in a second, if you'll let me lead the dance. The point is, there is no list that I'm aware of that shows the number of personnel or values to them that leads to that number. So the second part would be that at the town council's meeting where they took the Board of Finance's budget, they claimed that they had spoken with the superintendent about a reduction to $300,000. And again, I would ask if that's in fact true, and if there's a listing that gets to $300,000.
So I will address it this way. Normally, the audience of citizens isn't back and forth, but I'm going to address, as you bring up the topics, and then I'll have Brian verify it, is the town manager, I believe it was Jack Healy, correct?
Yes.
Or was it Kevin Delaney?
No, Jack.
So Jack did call the superintendent and essentially informed him that the $400,000 was being reduced to $300,000, and was the superintendent okay with that? the superintendent said, it's not in my budget, I'm happy to get whatever we can get, but it's not mine to say happy or not happy. Brian, would that be correct?
Yes, to the point of, if that's gonna cover the personnel, the security personnel that we talked about, and 300,000 is enough to do that.
That's the only description that I've heard it mentioned with the 400,000 was that it was a different number of personnel. We could debate what the right number of personnel is, but it's a personnel and equipment number to put a security director and guards in schools.
Right. And also, whatever materials they would need, supplies, protective
I
gear.
use it under the
Yeah,
term of
right.
equipment, but
Right.
anything related to
Right.
to that staff, not,
And the town manager said that the 400,000 was a placeholder that he put in there, an arbitrary number. So the
Okay,
question
so-
really is, does 300,000 get the job done?
so the background is that in discussions that the town council had, and I use the term loosely, because it was a discussion on a Monday, that the town council met for a special budget where the Board of Finance deputy chair presented the budget to the town council. There was a discussion period, and things went back and forth. But one of the things that was said that I think is probably the most important, that we're just not learning this lesson, is Alex Genome of the council was talking about looking at things in a longer range aspect. And we tend to focus on the budget that we're dealing with right now. And oh my gosh, the people can't afford this budget. But we don't think about where we're headed. We don't talk about things longer term. But we did for security, and that's what's perplexing me. The mayor met with the superintendent. They came up with some thoughts, some ideas. We heard the board debate the notion of armed, not armed. But there's been discussion. There was a forum with the community on this, of anything that's in this budget, be it town side or Board of Ed side. This has had some legs and has talked about it. I don't believe that the Board of Ed's proposal at 575 was simply personnel. As I recall, it included hardware, specifically cameras and devices that would allow you to record the images from those cameras. In other words, making them useful, for lack of a better term. If you have a camera, you could see they're entering the building now, hurry, or you could say, gee, something was reported, let's go back and take a look. The notion of recording seems very important. So if we leave it in Department 61, and I want to do that for the purpose of the time that you're giving me tonight. The Department 61 is not Board of Ed operational.
Correct.
It's part of the $9.5 million of school stuff on the town side that the town likes to talk about, but never with you,
Correct.
okay? So if we left it there, then the questions, and I'm not saying you have to answer these questions, but questions I would have is, if it's outside the operational budget and in Department 61, how do you value it against $0 of capital? In other words, there were things that you wanted to do, perhaps refurbish the Willard basement as an item, perhaps special ed vans, which were never in the capital budget that was presented, that then was reduced to 0, or the elementary phone upgrade, which was in but now is not. So I'm finding that the notion of a security plan is somewhat of a carrot that's out front of the Board of Education. It looks yummy. I wish I could get there. But as of this moment, as you said, it was a lump sum value. I don't know that there's any certainty that a $400,000 value, which is now $300,000, remains at $300,000. And I guess I'll be interested to see, as you look forward to what the other things outside of the operational budget is, how those things balance, because it's absurd to me that a Board of Education that needs $450,000 to $500,000 of capital every year can do with lump sum 0. It's then a question, as it's been through time immemorial, if you were given $300,000, is security what you would do with it, or would you do other capital, or would you do as we had to face many years ago, to shift from capital We made the decision to drop it to zero and put it in the operation. What's the right thing to do? It's a terrible conundrum to have to face, and I'll sit down and listen to you debate what you've got for addressing the reductions that were handed out. Thank you.
It may be best for us to address some of your questions now rather than wait. Make sure we get to them and then invite whoever would like to speak next. So, speaking about capital, we are, as a Board of Education, are extremely dissatisfied with the fact that our capital is zero. We submitted a significant number for capital. Rich, do you have the number of the book open there? If you talk about capital,
Total was, the original total was, I think, 2 million, including the security at that point. That was the initial number that you brought forth.
okay, and building and site, the page on building and site?
700,000.
700,000, so we asked for somewhere in the area of $2.7 million worth of capital and building and site. That includes security and so forth. And for whatever reason, it wasn't included in the town's budget presentation. We were told that we got that information to them too late and it couldn't be included. I'm gonna go on a soapbox here for a second and give you some, what's interesting about that is security was included in that number and magically somehow it did get into the budget. So if that got in, how did not everything else get in? The phones were on there, they got into the capital request, but the rest of it didn't. Your question about prioritizing, we have security at the top of our list, but we also see that $400,000 original allocation now at $300,000 as an addition to, not and/or. I'm not sure that anybody on the board, but I certainly would allow people to speak up, that people would want to discontinue security for any of those other items that you mentioned. But we also feel that the phone system for the elementary schools is just as important as security, because if you can't call for help, what's the point of having the security to begin with? I mean, if the phones are failing, and that's an area that's a weakness, that should be included. We know that that's also been taken out of the budget at this point. I open it up to any other board member that wants to comment on that, because I shouldn't be the only person speaking, but I think that that gives you an idea of where we are coming from. There's obviously a lot of back and forth what's going on with the whole budget process. Politics truly do get involved, and we work very hard to not engage in that as a nonpartisan, non-political board. But what we will say that we feel we've been treated unfairly relative to capital and site, building and site. But at this point, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. So with that, anybody who wants to add to what I've said so far? Alan?
We're having a hard time with capital and site building, but the reality is we're also looking at cutting teachers. So I don't know what's the bigger argument. What are we looking at? Are we more concerned about the telephone system? We're losing 5 teachers, or I mean, there's no good decisions. I can't really say that I would prioritize one over the other. Obviously, safety is important, but you can't have safety unless you have teachers, and teachers to teach your students. So I mean, it's a circular discussion that's going nowhere, because we have arbitrary cuts with no long-term plan. As John's mentioned, when you keep getting zeros, it's not sustainable. Zeros for capital, site, and building. Tell me one household that goes with 0 increase year after year after year, or one household that can get away with 1.3% increase year after year. It's just, it's not sustainable. And everything that could be cut to have the least amount of impact has already been cut. If you look at the administrators and the teachers, and, you know, I'll read things in the paper with misinformation, but the reality is everything that could be cut has been cut. And that's why we're here with these very difficult decisions. So, to your point, I can't prioritize teachers over capital over security, because right now there's really nothing left to prioritize, because when you're looking at zeros and and small increases, there's not many decisions you can make.
Fair enough.
Right, yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I would just say, I mean, the question that you asked, John, with respect to, you know, what would you, what would we value as a BOE and how would we allocate those funds? I think if we were to turn the hands of time back, maybe we would have made different decisions, but I think your analysis with respect to security being dangled like a carrot is a fair one. I feel like that was a pawn in a chess game that just, and that pawn got moved back and forth across the board and kind of put us in a really tough spot. So certainly we don't want to compromise children or educators' security, but it did kind of push us in a certain direction with respect to making decisions that had we been communicated, had we had open and honest communication from the beginning, perhaps things would have unfolded somewhat differently. I don't know.
And to go
I
off
do.
Carrie's point though, like, and Adam, you know, like we put in the Citizen last week, you know, over the past 5 years, we've already cut 22 teachers. So with additional cuts of teachers and with the security, and this is what something, you know, I think the security is important, but I think we also need teachers to educate our kids, and we need favorable class sizes so people live in town and people want to come to our school. But one of the fears that, you know, with the security being dangled like a carrot, one of the fears that I brought up at one of our meetings was, if we agree to security, will we be cut other places? And here we are now, we have to make decisions to cut teachers, and that's not what we want to do as a Board of Ed. We want to support the education in town.
Well said on all three of your parts. So I hope that answers kind of some of what you were hoping for clarification. Is there anybody else who would like, Mr. Lemaglia?
Sam O'Malley.
Please do. Address?
78 Hickory Hill Road. You know, let me give you a little, on the Board of Finance, when we did the budget, first I want to say that we've had a really great working relationship for 2 years. We were all honest with the superintendent. We've had a number of meetings with the president and the superintendent, and we were very honest with on both sides, and we've kept our promises to the best of our ability. And when we did the budget, we informed the superintendent and the president. We said, we're gonna cut you 1.3 million, and we discussed what were the things, and we decided we can live with it as long as you stay with your 3%. At no time, and you can see in this room, the mayor's not even here, at no time, the mayor, Brendan Luddy, Alex Giacone, or Charlie Panessa ever came to a Board of Finance meeting during the whole budget process. The mayor came in one time because he was upset over something, because he's always upset, and that was it. And we asked him, we said, well, Mr. Mayor, where do you think the mill rate should be? Get some direction from him. It's been 2 years, we've never gotten an answer from the mayor. We've never gotten any direction from the mayor. He's never asked us on the Board of Education side or the town side what we really need. His answer is we've got to cut the budget, keep the taxes low. So I wanted you to explain some problems we have at the town besides not funding education. The mayor doesn't understand we have an $8 million $8 million liability. It's $8 million that we have to pay for people that are retired from the old pension fund. He doesn't comprehend that. He doesn't comprehend that we need capital, not just on the school side, but we need capital on the town side. When the Board of Finance puts a capital budget together, those are the things we really need. We've spent hours, we have Mark Holmes on the budget committee, on the capital committee. We actually spend hours on that. In 5 days, the mayor's cut everything in capital. You say you don't have any capital? Well, the town side has no capital. We need 5 cruisers. The mayor didn't even call the police department, even have the nerve to call the police department. He even lied and said that the police union endorsed his plan. He never spoke to the police union. And they got 2 cars. They cut the phone lines without even calling the superintendent and said, you really need the phone lines. And now they assume that you guys are gonna put the phone lines in. That's the new that because you have enough money in your budget. We took the $400,000 out of the town side to give it to the Board of Education because we felt that you guys were the ones that know how to manage the security since it's your school. Mayor made a big deal, to the point where we had to hire our own lawyer, because the mayor threatened to just move it around, and we decided, okay, we're gonna put it back. We knew the mayor was gonna cut that. We knew the mayor was gonna cut it, because the mayor, when the mayor cut, there is no plan on the mayor's side. He's anti-education, Brendan Luddy's anti-education, what's his name, Alex Giaconi's anti-education, Charlie Panessa's anti-education, you got a Republican town committee, the majority of them are anti-education, led by Scott Veely. Scott Veely goes to the senior center and says that you guys have so many assistant principals, and nobody was there to correct him. The only person was Arthur Powers that corrected him, and if you saw the video, he did a great job, but there was nobody there. And they're going around town, the mayor's going around town that says that you don't have to lay teachers off, you have plenty of money. Alex Giaconi's going around town and telling people that we don't understand the budget, and neither do you. But they don't understand it because they don't spend any time on it. So we all have to work together and try to get the message out there, whatever cuts, and it's a shame that you have to cut these teachers. It's really a shame. And their philosophy is keep the taxes low as much as possible, deprive the town of everything, and property values are gonna fall, education system's gonna be not what we've known for years. I mean, we've had kids that have gone through the system, we want them to have the same education that our kids have, but the mayor doesn't seem to care. So you got a tough job ahead of you, but you also have a tough job that you gotta get the message out there. Because the mayor has 7.9% of the people that voted against the budget last year. They're gonna go out and vote against this budget. They can't wait to vote against the budget. If you read the blog, Scott Veely can't wait to close down a school. He said that in one of his blogs the other day, that he wants a school shut down. Alex Giaconi says that we should shut down Hubbard School. Brendan Luddy wants to shut the 2 pools down. These are the facts that we on the Board of Finance are dealing with. You really don't understand the battles here. It is, maybe it's political, I don't know how the mayor thinks he can win an election by cutting all this stuff, but he has won the election. And someday we're not gonna have Mayor Kaczynski here, and someday we're gonna end up paying for all this stuff. And we've gotta get the message out there, we've gotta work together as 2 boards and get the message out there that these 4 individuals are leading this town in some type of crisis that I don't know how we're gonna solve. I know when Adam became mayor, this was a 2001 crisis, they did the same thing, and it took you, 5 years to fix it maybe?
Yeah.
Right, and they're blaming Adam because he bonded all this stuff. Adam had to buy this stuff that Paul Argazzi didn't buy. And we're doing the same thing, we're not buying trucks, we're not buying equipment, we're not buying everything, we have leaky roofs at the town garage. You think you have problems, go to the town garage, they're washing trucks at 5 below zero outside because the mayor won't put a building for them. If those guys slip, they could break their arm, their leg, they could be on permanent disability, and the mayor doesn't care. Ask one of those guys if the mayor ever went to the town garage. They never saw him at the town garage. Ask him if he has come here and have a discussion. So the last time we met as a board, what did we hear from the mayor? Security. And we heard him brag about all his accomplishments, which incidentally, he bonded them all anyway, so it wasn't really an accomplishment, it put us in more debt. So you gotta understand, the mayor doesn't care about security, it's just a way for him to win an election. I met with the mayor before the budget process, and I said, Mark, you're not gonna cut the Board of Education, let the Board of Finance do its job, and you leave it alone. He says, why? I gave him $1 million in security, and that's what he thinks. He thinks because he gave you $1 million in security, you could do without teachers. That's what he thinks, and this is who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a man you can't make a deal with because he's untrustworthy, and you know that. He's untrustworthy. The mayor you cannot deal with the mayor because he does not tell the truth. That's the bottom line. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Is there anybody else who would like to?
Sam Sack, can I sit? Hey, John O'Brien, Vineyard Drive. Stand your ground. I gotta make that perfectly clear, because Sam brought up some interesting points. This mayor you cannot trust. He'll say one thing and he'll stab you in the back. I'm a senior citizen in this town. My last child graduated school, I'm trying to figure it out, 14, 15 years ago. I never complained about taxes going up for education because they enjoy the growing school systems. Now, alert, I have grandchildren going to this school system. I don't want their education cut either. It's a fantastic education. My kids enjoyed Berlin school systems. They're all doing well in life. Well, actually, the youngest one just retired. You know. But as far as Mark, it's called reelection. Just remember last year, you know, the budget wasn't even brought out. It was 4 by 8 sides, acts of taxes. You know, there was no budget. They scared the seniors. He scares the seniors all the time. They come out in groves. I think it was 7.9% voted against that budget last time around. You have to get to the seniors, because that's what he does. He preys on the senior citizens that basically turned down the budget. And then he says, well, that people in Berlin spoke. Well, 7.9%. We have to get the people that have the children going to these schools to get out and vote not to cut the budget. There's a few other things, but my age, I kind of like forget. But stand your ground, do not trust the mayor. I'm surprised he didn't put the tax, you know, budgets back out. Fantastic school system, my kids enjoyed it. Again, I live on a fixed income, and I don't mind paying extra taxes. You know, Sam did say about the wash bay down at Town Hall, slipping inside. Yes, I was down there. They have to come up with 1 wall, 2 garage doors. You know, police cruisers, there's 1 police cruiser they won't even use. That's how bad it is. Locker room for the police department. During the summer, it gets so hot in there, they put fans in there. They have the bulletproof vests and everything. They have to literally take the outside covering off and wash them. What's grown inside the vest itself? What kind of bacteria? He knows all this, the mayor, but it's called re-election. He's kicked this can down the road for the last 4 years and everything, and it's gotta stop. It's gotta stop. Do not let him cut the education. Thank you.
John, can you state your address one more time? I'm sorry, I missed it.
12 Vineyard.
Thank you.
Anybody else who'd like to address the Board of Education? Going once? Going twice? Closed. Okay, so next up is really our discussion of the budget, where we are, and what I would like to outline is really the goals of what I would like to have we accomplish tonight as efficiently as possible. But just a quick summary so that we know kind of where we started, how we got here. We have video here, so let's make sure that we have it all. But the superintendent provided us with a 5.96% budget increase for this year, approximately $2.6 million. The Board of Education then reviewed that budget and adopted it as is. We did not ask for any reductions. What the superintendent provided us was a budget that took care of all existing programming and positions, didn't add anything new with few exceptions. For example, the school district asked for a new guidance counselor at the high school because the guidance team there is overloaded with caseloads. So we are not doing the students justice from the guidance point of view. There were some stipends reinstated and a part-time clerical position for 14 hours a week. So nothing of significance were added to the budget. Our contractual obligations, meaning all contracts signed and implemented, were $985,000 worth of that 2.3% of the overall request. Contracted services at $364,000, of which just under $300,000 of that is the ESS program. Transportation and utilities of $122,000. Tuition of $557,000. And then the new staff and those items that I just talked about were about another $566,000. I think it's important that I also say that there were paras that were put back into the budget and they were put into that budget because we lost an arbitration with the state, and we were ordered to reinstate those positions back into the system. So, to reiterate, Brian gave us a budget, we didn't add anything new, and we passed that to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance reviewed our budget. They did have conversations with us, talked about items that they were looking at, and they voted to reduce our budget $1.3 million. A significant number, one that is a difficult thing for us to overcome, but through some work, we have identified some of those areas. The town council then reduced an additional $400,000. So we're now, this evening, here to look at $1.7 million worth of budget cuts, budget request cuts, let's make sure I say it, because, you know, people say, well, it's not a cut, but we requested one budget, it was been reduced by $1.7 million. That has an impact on the services that we can provide. So what I would like to accomplish tonight is identify all of the potential cuts that equate to the $1.7 million that this Board of Education is willing to put on that white pad and stand behind. Because if history repeats itself, $1.7 million is just where we're starting. There's gonna be more to come, because should the referendum fail, which is what it does every year after year after year, there'll be more cuts to where we are today. So, with that said, I'll need a scribe, someone who's willing to write on the whiteboard so that we can put it up on paper.
I will.
Julia, you got it, thank you for volunteering.
Do you have a marker?
Yes, we can mark as well.
My bad.
Some items we've already talked about. I want to put them on the list, but we may shift our focus now based on additional information, so.
Oh, you're good. Oh, I'll move it over.
Is there any questions about, or any additions to what I'm outlining as a goal for this evening? Anybody want to add anything else to what I've said so far, or I didn't summarize it appropriately? Okay. So the information that Brian has provided us, he should have a budget in the original budget stack graph that he gave us in our budget process. You can see where the lines kind of draw. The black line is where we were if it was last year's increase. The highest line is where we stood before the town council's reduction, and then the line in the middle is kind of where we fall. You can see we still don't cover contractual obligations. To the side of that are those areas that we identified with the initial Board of Finance budget reduction, but I think it stands that we need to talk about those as we go forward. On this white piece of paper, you'll see the conversation about athletics, what the dollar value is regarding McGee sports, Sterling High School freshman sports, and an abbreviated JV schedule. And on these other spreadsheets, you'll see that we have stipends across the board for multiple programming, because I believe that we're gonna have to look at that. The other thing we want to talk about today is the institution of fees. So with that said, Julia, let's put a couple of things that we've identified out of the gate. We have certified salaries and benefits at $500,000. And I actually,
You want me to start with the
yeah,
number?
you can just start with the number and then put what it is next to it. I challenged the 500,000 at 6 teachers, because there are dollars that need to be added back into that. The payment of unemployment, There's a couple other things that fall through that. So, Brian, not to put you on the spot, but I kind of challenge that it's actually 500 and it may be something less than that. And if we're looking for 500, then the number is not gonna be 6 teachers, it's gonna be something greater than that.
It's up more than that, because you're not cutting your most experienced teachers, you're cutting,
Right.
Well,
unless they have low enrollment.
Well, it depends on what programs, so it's not that it has to be less experience, it depends on what programs are cut. And you're right, there's definitely variability between a starting teacher and a veteran teacher. If you're talking 6 teachers that are $80,000, you're over the 500,000 with benefits and everything else.
Mhm.
You're over that, so the reduction would even be, would be more than that.
Right, but by their contract, they have the ability to bump down into other,
Right.
depending upon certifications
Right,
and so
right,
forth.
so there's a lot of,
So in their contract,
So
they have
there's,
the rights.
what I'm getting at is, there's a variable with, even with that 500,000.
absolutely.
It may be more than
Then
five, than
five,
6
six
teachers.
teachers.
And maybe more than 6 teachers, and it could be less than 6 teachers, but, we said 6 teachers is kind of a benchmark to say.
Brian, on that, on the 6th, and I don't wanna beat the dead horse, I had always been told as kind of a rule of thumb that you only really save half the salary of the person because of the amount of benefits that are necessary in the unemployment. Is that true, or was I misled at some point?
It depends on if the person attains another position.
Right,
So
so
then
then we have to assume that they're not
So
going
we
to.
assume it. So when we had unemployment, we looked at all those pairs that we had to lay off.
Okay.
So we had to budget to say that there would be unemployment when, and essentially we called a lot of them back that didn't take the unemployment. So you just don't know. You don't know. I mean, I don't wanna say, we have to prepare for it, otherwise there's another deficit in the budget.
Right, and then we end up like the town pension committee, where you're underfunding things that we have to fund.
Yes, there was not a million, so.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
So, before we get too far, this is a completely open forum discussion, so there's protocol, chime in whatever you want, it's a discussion here, so. Let's leave the number as it is, but we understand that there is a risk with what we're talking about.
Do you want me to put like 6 teachers, or just leave that out?
Let's just leave it
Leave it
at
out,
this
okay.
for now. Tuition transportation for the special education group,
Can we even touch that, though?
we've taken it as $400,000 because we have some, while Linda has identified who these students are, we have taken it, we've taken it as a reduction, kind of rolling the dice and keeping our fingers crossed. Realistically, with them identified, we need $400,000 elsewhere. Maybe it's not 400, but, I mean, that is completely at risk. We knew that when we put it on the paper. I'm fine putting it on the board, but I think that we need to highlight it, that we're gonna have to revisit it. What I'm, kind of what I'm driving at is when we get done, is we need more than $1.7 million worth of
Right,
value here, because some things are gonna be moving parts.
moving. So add it.
Please do.
Yeah, that's gonna bump something else.
Correct.
Particularly if Linda has already identified the individuals assigned to those
They simply
dollars,
don't have their
and
plans
it's
yet.
pretty much a certainty that things are happening. That's obligatory.
We pulled,
Is that on here? Just
That's
like
fine.
press.
no, just leave it like that.
Okay.
I hate that.
I know, I just didn't know if we wanted to label where it was coming from.
We have $300,000 worth of contracted services. We know that that's the ESS program. It crushes me to pull this out again for the 3rd consecutive year for a program to continue to run. And we know that it's brought so much value to the students that it does touch on in those, and their success here. Yet, here we are again, it's not in our budget, we're gonna pull it out again and hope that Brian and Mr. Cook know at the end of the day, we can fund it through their management of this year's budget again.
So my question is I remember when we looked at our initial budget, we also added it into the middle school. Has that been taken out, or is this?
That got taken out in the first
Okay,
cut.
I just checking.
That never made the original request.
So my only question here is the reduction of ESS, is that going to add additional monies for outplacements.
Mhm.
And is, really, is it really truly a reduction of 300,000, or is it less than 300,000 because of outplacements?
So, I'm gonna let the experts speak here, but I'll just give you my understanding is if we eliminate ESS, those students may require outplacing services, which realistically could cost us more than the $300,000 that we're talking about here.
I would say that's a pretty safe bet.
It reminds me
Just
a lot
matter
of
of time.
the teacher situation.
Might
where
take
you
a
cut,
year.
But then you end up having to cost more in the long run anyway.
Right, this is a line item in the budget here, but more than likely will cause an increase over here.
I feel like those two, the latter two, sorry, Rich, the latter two items are such a huge gamble, but there's a pretty good chance, and I don't wanna speak for you, Linda, but there's a pretty good chance that those are ultimately gonna cost us a far greater amount.
But then at that point, we're gonna have to go to the town and say we need money because we had to cut these. And I think that's unfortunate, but that's gonna be a natural consequence. It's like, if every year we say, we're losing this, we're cutting this, we're losing this, and we're cutting this, and we always seem to find a way.
My problem is that kids and families suffer
I agree.
in ways that we can't measure in dollars and
Mhm.
cents in the interim. And I think
No, but I
that's
feel like that's how the town sees it though. If the town is seeing, oh, every year we add this in, every year it doesn't get funded, we find a way to fund it. So now we're gonna cut it. And then on the other hand, it's gonna impact children. Obviously, that's not what I want, but I feel like the town side, maybe this is what they wanna see.
Well,
Maybe they wanna see us scrounging.
I'd actually like to address that and connect it to something that John said before about the lack of long-range planning.
Mhm.
In my mind, going forward, this is now what, third or fourth year in a row we've had to fund ESS out of excess funds at the end of the year. Hopefully, we have the money. Fourth,
This
Okay.
next year.
Next
so
year.
next year will be the fourth. I'll be honest with you, I don't see any possible way that that continues into year 5. You can't cut teachers and then at the end of the year say, well, we have excess money again at the end of next year to fund ESS again. So more than likely, if this is funded for one more year out of end of the year funds, it's gonna end up back in the budget, and if it gets cut, you're not gonna have excess money next year. Not with these kind of cuts, these deep. So that program may have one more year of life. Realistically. Just
No, I-
long term, we're just trying to look at it from the long term. How do you run people in programs and then bring that back and say, well, we laid everybody off, but we still have money left over at the end of the year, we're gonna fund it again.
I agree, that's a position we're in with school counseling right now at the high school though. We had to
Yeah.
cut it, the school counselors are overwhelmed, we have to bring it back. And it's gonna happen with these certified salaries that we're also cutting. So, but I understand, because every year I've been on the Board of Ed, it's been a fight for ESS, and every year we've had to fight for it.
So I'll get a little snarky here. I find it interesting that we know the ESS serves about 18 to 20 students at $280,000 to $300,000, yet we service 18 people in the community and we get to lose $870,000 a year, is if the numbers I've been granted with some of our other town programs. It's fascinating to me.
The position we're gonna be in my opinion, next year is something that we have never done in the past, is that come a certain point in the year, if we're looking at some of these outplacements and things that we're being very optimistic about, we may be laying off people mid-year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how tight, because there's no additional, like, we used to have additional outplacements budgeted, because we anticipated over, 2 or 3 a year. We haven't had those in years.
How does that work with contracts, and union contracts with laying off people during the middle of the year?
So you would do non-affiliated, right, where there's not a contract, and then with the union contract, have a difficult time doing that.
With the riffing, you would riff people the same way.
Yep.
What?
You would go through the reduction in force the same way.
Okay.
It's the timing of the years irrelevant.
But it's still, it's not as simple.
Mhm.
This, I don't have an answer, but this is like killing me. Honestly, my stomach right now, I'm so angry. You're affecting our children right now. I'm looking at this, it's my heart's breaking. You've got these children who need these services. I'm not mad at us that we're cutting. That's not my point. And talking about the future, when people want to talk about this town years from now, and I know people here support us and stuff, but If you start, okay, so my husband grew up here, I didn't. He still lives here, he's raising his children here because he loves this town, he loved the education he had. If we keep doing this crap, we're not supporting our children, they're not gonna support this town. So what's gonna happen with this town 10 years from now? Everybody likes to talk about the future. This is not helping our future of this town. And we're just gonna have to make more cuts, more cuts, more cuts, and we're gonna be a dying town. And I hate this. I hate the special education, I mean, these children that have to be outplaced, the ESS services, these are our desperate children who need help. I know we can't do anything about it, it's awful.
No, but what you're saying has to be said.
It's terrible.
Towns aren't built by cutting.
No.
I feel like we're mimicking the town council's attitude of let's make it so miserable that people leave, and we save money when they leave. But it's just a horrible strategy.
Our kids aren't gonna wanna come back and raise their kids in this town if we don't support them.
And I think your point, so I said it a previous meeting, and I'll say it again, I think the fact of the matter is we're looking at a sub group of our school population, right? So we think we're impacting a smaller number of kids and families. But the fact, I mean, big picture perspective is that this has a ripple effect, right? Like you reduce the services provided to the neediest and most
Absolutely.
vulnerable children, and guess
Yes.
what? We bleed out emotionally, and other children are impacted as well, but people don't see the big picture. We think short term, we don't get to the long term that you're talking about, John, and understand that there is a ripple effect to this. So until it affects you personally,
Well, and Carrie, to your point with like, so we take out ESS, now these students are put into mainstream classes all day long with $500,000 of certified staff salaries and benefit reduction. So class sizes are bigger, kids are getting less support, and like you said, now it's gonna impact the whole school community.
And now you're forced to hire another social worker to deal with the kids who are
But then we don't have the
not
money
being
to hire
serviced by
them.
ESS. Right.
yeah.
No, this right here is,
It's cyclical and we're
Yeah.
just circling the drain.
Exactly. Yes.
So, not to, I mean, we could dwell on this all night long, but
Sorry.
there, we have identified $75,000 in savings for the benefits, moving, the town has moved it from 12% to 10%. The impact to our group is $75,000. So we can put that up there. We know that those savings are gonna be realized. We should put them on there. That's a $75,000
addition,
benefit savings.
so it's just that.
So it's not a cut,
So steady.
Put the others in
You want me to put
just,
parentheses?
yeah, just put it in parentheses. No, not around that.
Yeah.
That's just a separate
No,
line.
these are cuts,
Oh,
and
all
then,
right, all right.
Different color
She's a
marker?
business teacher.
Yeah, business teacher.
well then, if we're doing different colors, this should be red. Okay.
So there is 75,000, which is,
It's still a cut to the benefits.
it's a cut to the benefits line.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a cut, a reduction to our overall budget. It would be the same thing.
So you're gonna write
It's moving our benefit from,
No, I don't disagree, but the rational mind is looking at it as a savings, not a cut.
correct. So just put benefit savings.
But it was included in our initial budget request.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay? That's not in any of these documents anywhere. Brian has said that he is going to be able to save $100,000 in
Supplies.
supplies, textbooks, materials, PD, pick whatever category he says he's gonna get it from.
Parentheses.
I don't,
Yeah.
I don't really know if you can do that, Brian, considering what you've already cut, even going into the budget, but you gave us the numbers, so I'm putting it on the board.
You know, those aren't people, but they're gonna impact how people can do their jobs.
All of it at the end hits the students. Everything we put on there so far hits the
Yep.
students.
Everything.
All right, so now let's talk about the other things.
Athletics.
McGee Sports. McGee Sports touches 350 unique athletes. It's worth $103,000. That's coaching stipends, transportation, and all the costs. we've had it on the list before people go, but I believe it needs to go on the list. Because we're not required to provide middle school sports in any way. We can provide an intramural program that would address the athletics piece. I see Adam shake his head, and I know where he's coming from.
But to your point, Matt, I think it's so unfair if we're gonna touch this right here, but not athletics. We're gonna slash special ed, but not athletics. I think it's like disgusting, so I think we need to add it.
I am in favor at this point of taking McGee Sports, putting it on the list, and that is part of our $1.7 million worth of budget reductions.
Should we do all of it, or?
Let's go line by line, but it's not going to be $103,000, because we will need to add some money back in to implement an intramural program.
Is there any existing stipend that would cover that contractually, Brian? Do you know if there's anything in there right now about intramurals?
No, there's nothing in for intramurals. There's a listing of stipends.
Yeah, I saw that. I just didn't know if there was-
We're currently working with the BEA, as we agreed upon, negotiations, to reconfigure the stipends and look at the stipends. So there may be some funds there that we could reallocate towards intramurals.
Would the $103,000 include the $3,100 athletic department liaison to me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it includes that.
Yeah.
Can anybody
It's gotta be on
provide
the
an
list. We have to have that.
estimate for what we may have to?
25,000.
Cut it by that?
No.
Keep it.
Well, no,
Yeah,
I'm saying you would cut.
So let's
you'd
make it a
$75,000.
$78,000 reduction.
I would be
Keep
stunned by $25,000 in intramurals. There's no way it should be that much money.
But there's
offer a
multiple
handful-
intramurals.
Well, we offer what we have. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be. We can do what we decide. Let's say there's $10,000 towards stipends, and that's all they can offer, would be $10,000 worth. 25, that's a lot. I've run intramural programs. That's a lot of money for an intramural program. Even several of them.
So give us a better number, Rich.
I think, quite frankly, I think 10,000 is a more reasonable number.
How are
considering
you
what
gonna
you're
get
buying.
people, how are you gonna get people to run them if they were going from having a budget of $103,700 to
Most stipends are
$10,000?
you can make it $1,000 a sport, and you can run an intramural season on that.
So what are they currently getting?
When we ran intramurals years ago,
Yeah.
it was an hourly rate that they ran.
I'm sorry, it was a
It
what?
was an hourly rate.
Oh, all right.
That you ran intramurals at hourly rate. It wasn't as though you got a stipend to run. There's different models. We used to have intramurals as well as having interscholastic. It was a number of years ago. But there was an hourly rate, and it was, somewhere in the 20s back then, probably the $30 an hour rate.
So back then, we offered both.
Both.
So as the years have gone on, we offer less and less.
Yes.
I mean, you'd have to negotiate that with the BEA, because they're the people who are gonna be collecting the stipend.
We have various rates, right? We could do, we have various rates for curriculum work, various rates for doing PD. We'd have to have an intramural rate.
Would it be the same rate based on the teacher contract?
We would have a rate that they would get regardless of what intramural we'd have.
So,
I mean, you already have the uniforms and all the equipment, so all you're really doing is paying for the people that run the program.
Well, you don't have.
But you wouldn't have.
No, you don't have the uniforms.
Oh, really?
That was inter-school, so
No,
it's
it's
intramural.
inter-school.
So you don't have.
Oh, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry,
So
Yeah.
it's different.
you're right.
So you would have that expenditure, so that, you're right, is $10,000 to run it, providing all equipment, uniforms and all that stuff is
Well,
already
quite
present.
frankly, I wouldn't buy uniforms for an intramural program, not if you're only playing within your school.
They're
Yeah, you wear
kids.
pennies. You're doing soccer or something, you don't
Yeah.
need uniforms, you just.
I did floor hockey when I
Yeah,
was.
whatever it would be.
so I want to make a suggestion here. So we're talking about $100,000 that.
$100,000.
How many students?
350.
350.
350 students for $100,000. And I do understand the argument that, for cutting things for ESS, we need to touch sports too. When I looked at the numbers last year, I haven't seen the numbers for this year, all the sports in MIGI are not created equal. And what I mean by that is you look at the ROI, you've got 350 students that are absolutely positively affected in this type of thing. Some of them are very low cost per student, some are very, very high cost per student. So before we sit here and work up the details of exactly what we're gonna do, I would make a suggestion that we say we're gonna cut the funding for this, perhaps eliminate some of the sports, but if there are sports that are very low cost per student, we retain those and charge for those. Because some of
Why only
them can be
those?
spent.
Why only those, Jake? Why not offer the opportunity to have the participants pay for all the sports, but just we can't fund it anymore?
That's,
Because I don't think we can
Yeah.
pick some sports and say, these sports are free, and then those sports.
No,
are
not
free.
free, nothing's free.
Right.
The pay to participate comes back on the table again, so we don't have to lose what we're offering, but we can't fund it anymore.
yep,
So, can someone do the math of how much it would cost per student?
I don't think it matters.
I don't think it matters, I don't think we can figure that out right now.
Right, our
It's
budget
a
is
$100,000 cut.
So we're
If
just
we
gonna
want
hold
to-
on.
If we want to run a program, then we're gonna implement a fee
It's gotta be self.
that covers it. It's gotta be self-sustaining.
So we're just gonna cut McGee Sports.
That would be my vote.
It's on the list.
Okay, so
Well,
Adam,
hold on, let's make sure we're on the same page here. So,
Cutting the funding for the sport.
I just think,
I wanna hear
Not necessarily
what-
rejecting your proposal, just saying, right,
Cutting-
might
well,
have to speak for
yeah.
you, but you're saying,
I'd like to hear what Brian has to say about this.
when you go down the road of allowing people to pay for it, and that's how you totally self-fund it, most of the pay-for-play is supplement.
mm-hmm,
So when you do that, you really make a position where those that have and those don't have. So you're creating a position where there's opportunities for some that have the resources and not opportunities for the other. And it really stands against everything that a public school is about, to do that. So I just wanna caution if we go down that road, that's really, you're saying, well, if you have the money, you can do it. If you don't, you can't. And so that's why you'll never, I don't know any district that has a pay-for-play where you pay 100% of the fees to have the program.
I think it's not practical. Again, we looked at the numbers last year, and I think some are very reasonable, some are unreasonable, and some we can't. So I think what I would say is we, eliminate it by a certain number, but we have to take a close look again and figure out, if some are sustainable, because they're very low.
Well, I think at
cost per
some
student.
point, as far as bringing them back, then it's a chance to look at whether they're sustainable or not. But I think, if you're gonna make a cut, cutting them and saying they're not there, see, when you offer intramurals, you offer them to everyone, there's no fee for it. You come in, regardless. I understand where you're coming from, because there are programs at McGee that, what I like about the McGee program currently is that whether it's fall, winter, or spring, there is a sport that it's a non-cut, everyone makes the team, so it's their first opportunity to be on the team. And that's,
That's not true.
yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Oh, really?
Some
No,
are,
it's not.
yes.
It's not true.
Why not?
Everyone,
I can tell you they cut.
Basketball's cuts.
Basketball.
No, I'm saying every season, every
season,
sport,
there's a sport.
Oh, each
where
sport.
somebody's
So you
gonna
have
have,
cross-country,
there's an opportunity every season.
and you have wrestling in the winter, it hasn't done cuts, and then you have track in the spring. So, so that was a discussion years ago too. So, the comments that are coming up are, were relevant years ago.
So the point is that there are, so you look at track, cross country, I mean, these are very, very low cost per student. They affect a lot of students, and, it's a very hard time in middle school to try to fit in and get along, and we're actually going to be hurting students when perhaps they can't fund it. Many, many districts around, we're probably one of the few at this point that don't have a fee for sports. So to go right from no fee to no sports, or at least no,
We're also one of the few that offers middle school sports as an interscholastic. Most don't.
not sure.
I don't know, when I was out campaigning, I was going to a lot of the middle school games, and I went to the cross-country meet, and there were 8, 9, 10 towns there. I was going to the soccer games, I did see a lot.
It's not very centralized. You do have Cromwell, you've got Cromwell, you've got
Rocky Hill.
East Haddam, Ram. I mean, it's a little,
Portland.
you're driving a little bit.
Yeah, it's spread out.
Yes.
Southington does a lot of it through fundraising. I don't know that we're at 100%, but it's pay to participate and also fundraising. Each sport has almost created their own little parent booster club, and they do multiple fundraisers just to keep the sport focused. keep it floating. But there's also no exact amount of money that it takes to keep a sport floating. You can't really tell exactly what the costs are gonna be completely. So a lot of the sports, they get it kind of, sort of, do you get kind of close? I don't know if there's target monies. I will tell you, this happened 2 years ago in Southington, and the administrators will tell you it's still a mess. And they're still doing it, but it's a mess. So to me, what Brian is saying is because of an equity point of view, it almost makes more sense to wipe it clean rather than offering where only the wealthy people can afford to play.
One thing that my district does for the high school, I have no idea how they handle middle school, but every sport has the same fee, it's either $30 or $60, and then again, if your family can't afford it, you need to speak with the athletic director, or if you qualify for free and reduced lunch, then that comes out of the student activity fee.
We talked about this before.
Yes.
You're exactly right. Many towns have, maybe it's $150 per sport, there's maximums for, and plus if you're free or reduced lunch, you could
Right.
qualify that. It's an interim shut. Like, again, I think taking a big chunk out of the funding, but we have to look at, again, I think it's incorrect to say that it's just wealthy students could afford the $100, especially.
No, maybe I exaggerated, but that's essentially what Brian was saying, that the people from the lower socioeconomic groups may not be able to afford to play. And therefore, there's an equity issue.
Stipulations for that,
Yes.
and which is, again, what.
But that's still money that's got to come from somewhere.
So, I mean, I'm looking at it this way, is we're looking to get to $1.7 million, and we have risk on the top end. This is $100,000 that, in my eyes, is it's an easy decision for me, regardless of the 350 students, not because I'm looking at it from the other perspective of, I'd rather take those athletics away at the middle school than to cut 3 or 4 more teachers, or 3 or more support staff. It sucks, absolutely. I'm very uncomfortable having this conversation. But if I use Mr. Richards' analogy of the archery target, is you've got your core and you're building out with what all the additional opportunities for students. I can't justify now taking out 2 or 3 or 4 more teachers to get to that same threshold.
For the purpose of timing, I would suggest maybe we put it up there as a full cut, move on to the next thing, and then take an overall view of what's on the sheet.
Finish,
And then maybe eventually, if it stays on the list, there's a subcommittee that goes into, let's take a deeper look at it. Can we do pay to participate? Can we offer intramurals? What are the options going forward on the table? That doesn't have to be funded by us.
So put up the full 103,700?
Yeah.
Put it up at 100, just for even numbers sake. Along the same lines, folks, as we have freshman sports at the high school. It's baseball, football, volleyball, girls basketball, and boys basketball. It affects 80 unique freshman athletes. It's $48,000. Essentially, we're talking about $50,000 here. We've talked about freshman sports. My position on this is there's not freshman sports across all disciplines that are offered at the high school. Most other sports are, well, if you're a freshman and you're trying out and you make the JV team, good for you. And if not, you can try again next year.
Or can they just keep them on JV and practice with JV and just not get played?
But it depends on CIAC
A lot
roster
of schools do
requirements
it.
and so forth.
I believe that's what happened back in 2002, 2003.
But then if we touch a freshman sports but don't touch a JV, then that opportunity is still there, and if they don't make the team to
Well, I
play,
think
they can
that-
still practice.
I think that's where I was headed, is if you look at the JV, we talked about reducing the schedule for the JV teams. We're talking about $8,300.
Right.
To me, that's not significant enough at this point to put up there, especially if we're gonna if we were to eliminate freshman sports. We would wanna give the JV sports the opportunity to play. The
Really, I would be
question,
cutting, I'm sorry, if you do even look at the JV, it's just the officials, essentially the bus transportation that you're cutting. Because you're not cutting the stipends for the coaches, because that's set contractually anyway.
correct.
What if we were to cut 40,000 from freshman sports and put that additional 8,000 into JV, and then Because I think
JV doesn't need any
You
extra.
don't need extra.
they don't need
teachers
it,
in JV.
okay.
No.
I just think that there is a benefit to having the kids play with the JV as freshmen, because they
Many
can
sports
grow and
they do.
develop a lot throughout the season, and they might not, you know, they can change as a player throughout the course
But
of the
many of the
season.
sports there,
They do.
basketball,
This is
for
just
example,
about
volleyball, these kids are playing multiple games a night.
Okay, so it's not necessarily taking away opportunities from freshmen.
That depends
They
on the
will still
sport.
have a team.
Depends on the sport.
Depends on the sport. I mean, there are roster limitations, I believe.
Practice is one thing, but games based on number of uniforms.
Yeah.
I know the soccer team is set at 40 girls. Why? Because there's 40 uniforms. That's the magic
Right.
in the whole
Yeah.
process. So I mean, it's,
It is gonna be limiting
yeah,
for certain sports. In other sports, it's not gonna be limiting. It's similar to what we talked about with you.
So
I say put the 50 up there.
I say, the freshman sports is cut.
But
And
50 or
I say
48?
put
put 50.
It's 50 because you're 103 on the other one, 30
Okay.
now. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. These aren't definitive cuts that we're making at this moment.
These
This
are
is
things
just a
that
conversation.
These are things that
Alright.
we are standing behind. Obviously, things are gonna change and we need to look at what else is out there, but for Devin's purposes, these are serious.
Well, and these could all change if the referendum, if the budget gets defeated, there's more cuts.
Correct.
Yeah. Are we looking at anything other than sports? Are we looking at band? Are we looking, forget teachers, I'm not talking teachers yet,
Well,
but,
that's up there.
Well, that's where I'm getting to next.
gotcha. I know, that's why I was looking at the
Well, that's
little
your
list as
number.
well.
Just flip it.
I will.
You have a listing of the various K-12 stipended positions, which would be the next avenue, elimination of all
So
clubs
small.
activities funded by K-12 stipends. And then the reduction of co-curricular.
Death by a million difference.
So, let's talk about clubs and activities. If we are talking about athletics, in order to be equitable, should we not also be talking about those clubs and other things that meet after school that give students opportunities, things that come to mind, and you know, you hate to say them, but, you know, is band, is, the robotics team,
They don't get any
is
money.
the,
Is robotics completely self-funded?
100%, they are not even a line item on here.
All right.
And that's something that we've said every year we were gonna put in and stop talking about it 2 years ago when Tim Sauter got off.
you know, drill teams,
Say
you know, pick an item. I
So,
mean,
so as I'm looking at this,
Drama club.
I'm just wondering, right, this is a question that I have, and I know the district I work in is very different. Every club gets the same stipend. It's like a $300 stipend. So why is the recycling club getting $748 versus the gaming club getting $299 versus the
So what we're doing right now.
Model UN
So
732?
what we're doing right now, because that became a discussion, is we're
Yeah.
sitting down with the BEA, looking at how often they meet, number of students at the impact. Is it a club that is a meeting weekly, are doing things on the weekends and nights? Is it a club that meets 4 times a year? So that's where the differentiation in numbers came over time. Now we're looking at saying, are these numbers true, and should they be where they're at? So we're gonna make adjustments based on that.
Okay, because I understand some clubs, like, for instance, the musical, that takes a ton of time, but choral director, that's part of the job, right?
No, there's always been a stipend for choral
Always,
director.
okay.
Who's, you know, if they're out performing weekends, there's always.
For all the time, you know, if they're gonna sing the national anthem at a parade or up in the
Okay.
council chamber, whatever it is, they're all over. So basically, we're looking at cutting all the fun things that get the kids engaged.
The yearbook is also on here twice.
This is split stipend.
Look into the names.
Yeah, it's 2 different names.
Wasn't she did a good enough job? She might also be right. You can see those.
That's an awesome deal if you're since it's also a clock
Kid might
course
come in.
offering.
When
It's
there's
not
no-
anymore.
Not anymore, there's enough kids to run it. I think that's why the stipend came back.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about the yearbook. I understand why class advisors get, that's a lot of work, the stipends,
Yeah, to people really.
But
Cut these stipends.
and I think all these things are really important, but
We can't go through line by
No,
line.
I think you need to come up with, I gave it to you as a reference, to
Right.
look, it's 138,000, but tied in there, you're gonna see that there's, you look at a guidance counselor's additional there because they work additional days. So department heads at the high school, they're tied in too. So you look at the 138,000, the larger numbers are typically like, department head for science. So I'd rather have you give me a number that we'd like to possibly look at.
The 138 is only the high school.
Right, but within the high school, you have department heads for science, math, social studies, and English. You also have a guidance K-12 director in there. You also have the counselors who make additional fees because they work an additional 15 days. You know, I mean,
So Brian, if they gave you a number, would it give you latitude to say the counselors are only gonna work 10 extra days instead of 15 extra
right,
days?
but I'm saying, if you give me a number that you think is reasonable to come out, I'll put together a proposal
Certain seconds,
of
get
reduction
together.
instead of going line by line. I wanted you to see, we talked about stipends, I wanted you to see what the total number was. I also wanted you for, just to see where, where that total comes from.
My instinct, and I don't even know what the number would be, I would rather cut stipends in order to save one teacher's job. If we, what the equivalency would be to a starting teacher's job of what, 50,000 essentially?
55.
I'll throw that number out there to start, and I have no reason other than that comparison to say that. Can you cut district-wide $50,000 worth of stipends to save one teacher's job?
I think if you're able to streamline stipends,
Just count that up.
I don't know how you can cut a teacher's job and keep all the stipends.
it looks like there's just a lot of stipends. I think the department head stipends are really important, and we just brought those back because they went away, we saw the impact, we need those. But as you look, there's like multiple people on yearbook. There's,
The department heads also work an additional 10 days. That's
Yeah.
tied into the stipend, so.
and I think that's an important stipend that we need to make sure we keep. I think, I don't know.
As a communication tool, I think it's important with the webmasters,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at each building, but, I mean, everyone has an impact.
So this is all combined, it's approximately 220,000.
Right.
Is that what it was,
Sorry,
220?
I'm in the spot and looking at your notes.
I guess, and again, I think in that number 50, to balance off with the teacher. Plus, we're only at 150 out of the 400 we still have to find. Would you give up?
No, I'm just, it's like,
As
he buys
as a placeholder, I put $50,000 down.
Just for, I think it's a reasonable amount. I don't want to cut any of these. Well, there's probably a couple that I would want, but I don't want to cut $50,000 into stipends. It's going to impact people's jobs and the kids that we're serving.
No, I'll take the back.
I don't want to be the one that says there's no yearbook this year. The one that says there's no talent show this year. I know. I can't
So are we,
justify versus, and these are all people, listen, I always got stipends when I did a whole bunch of extra stuff. It kept me floating financially all year long, and you begin to count on that money. So now you got people that are making stipends, doing a lot of good extra work for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 for 3 or 4 different events, and they rely on that money, and now you're impacting them.
in reality, they do much more work than the stipend actually covers. I think we all know that.
But to Rich's point, we were kind of having a side conversation, I said to him, okay, you cut someone's income by $6,000-$8,000, and we're already kind of middle of the road in terms of teacher salaries in Berlin. I don't look elsewhere,
You look elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
because that's pretty considerable.
There's some teachers that do an awful lot, You know, a teacher came up to me today and said, you know, if you cut the stipends, if you cut the sports, as a middle school teacher, I'll lose $20,000 my income.
Mm-hmm. We don't rely on that. That's not extra anymore.
Well, that's the teacher's perspective, never mind what the student, they have to go home at the end of the day, and that's how it was years ago. At the end of the day, students went home.
But on the other hand, there are teachers out there doing stuff, not getting stipends, like robotics. They don't get anything, and they're spending at least 20 hours a week extra doing robotics and getting them to competitions. So I'm not saying that they don't need them, I'm just saying there's no equity in this. Like, as I look through these numbers, it just seems random. It just seems, oh, you get a stipend, how much do you want? How much do you want?
But even though robotics does it for free, you're not gonna get these people to continue to do these
No, you're
stipends for free.
right.
Because they've been, the past precedents, they've been being paid for that time.
So then where's the
And
equity at?
realistically so.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, there is no equity when you're talking about cutting things,
right,
I think that if we're gonna address stipends, and I believe that we should, to Rich's point, if it's a difference between a teacher and a stipend, I wanna have the teacher in the classroom.
mm-hmm,
And if that, unfortunately, if that means that some of the students don't get to participate in some of the clubs that we end up reducing, taking those clubs out for whatever reason, that's where we are today. This isn't about, oh, I wanna make sure that they get all, students aren't gonna get all the opportunities they had before. That's just where we are. When you get small increments over a 5-year time period, and we've taken out these things, and I think Brian said it best when I talked to him earlier today, is you know what? Is each year we've been taking it on the chin and taking it on the chin, and making the cuts in the background that people can't see. Now that everybody's programmed to say, oh, they'll make it work. Well, we're out of make it work now, and now it's gonna hurt. And as much as we don't wanna sit here and affect our own children, that's where we are.
Yep, and actually, just to be clear, 50,000 in stipends is not just clubs. 'Cause now we're hitting, you're not gonna get 50,000 in stipends out of these club money. This is gonna be department leader money, or it's going to be, the writing coordinator money, or it's gonna be random acts of kindness club, and there's a club. Some of these are supply coordinator for the elementary schools. Those are the kind of things that would have to be considered, and it's gonna be your decision ultimately, how to cut 50 out of this. But it's not just gonna be after-school clubs.
Right, what is guidance at the high school? How's that separate?
Because they work extra days, that's the amount.
Oh, okay.
So that's right.
That's part of,
Right.
yes, you can't.
But-
Yeah, that's all, how much is untouchable, and then the rest is 50, yeah, it's ugly any matter which way you cut it.
Writing center?
We're at 220, total. Looking at 50 as a number.
How was that, at 220? I thought we were at,
on the
oh, because of 75? Oh, I see, I'm sorry, I gotcha.
It's not just high school.
25% of that number is 55,000.
Make it 50.
Or 60.
Make it 50,000
Make it 50.
and stipend reduction.
Okay, and even with that, we still need 200.
Yeah, we're still,
Or 125.
125.
You gotta come up
125.
400,000.
So there's,
I have a question for Brian, unless there's some matter, I'm gonna cut you off, I'm sorry. Brian, one of the things we've routinely said, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this out loud, is that when there's new teacher openings, we hire the best person regardless of salary. Is it time that we look at that practice?
We're gonna have to look at that.
We're gonna have to look.
Gonna have to.
How do you hire an 85,000 when you have a 50,000?
Because the position that we've been in is a position that we don't have to stay in. It's based on the financial constraints that we have.
Okay.
The extra's not there every penny, it's gonna be.
How do you lay off somebody versus hiring somebody to higher
The
salary?
other part, and I shared this with Adam today, is that even based on this budget process and where we are, we're losing opportunities to hire staff, to hire the best staff. Because we were scheduled for job fairs and things we've gone to for years. And there's no sense in going to those knowing we're cutting positions. You can't go off position. So having some, critical positions to fill, other districts are able to be more mobile and if it offers opportunities. We're gonna be so late in the game, we won't be hiring until June. So it causes a huge imposition on getting the right people and the best candidates. Not that it's, it's just, it's how things are going, and, we know that getting a number won't be till, close to the end of May.
All right. Brian, can you give us an idea of what elimination of co-curricular activities would look like?
We've touched on sports, the stipends. Do we look at band, musical? Do we go look at those areas?
I think I was specifically thinking of the things in the elementary schools that are like art and music.
Okay, that's not a co, so those would be what we call the specials,
Okay.
or
My bad.
so specials in the elementary, we're talking about, electives at the high school, and we call them exploratories at the middle school. So you're talking about anything outside of the reading, writing, math, that's like science.
So let's talk, does anybody have a stomach to eliminate specials at the elementary school?
I think we already have though, I think we already have in past years. Last year, we already cut the art teacher, right?
Yeah, but there's still art.
There's still art, we have to cut, and then.
Well, we got
because they
FTE
cut the high
reduction,
school and
right.
pulled them down.
Well, we stretched some of that we had and covered the FD. So we've not eliminated any programming at the elementaries last year or the year before.
I don't think,
There's not, in the elementary, you have your music, you have your art, you have your media, right? And then you have your tech integration, your tech. There's really not any other specials, and you get phys ed that you have at the elementary school.
I don't think we're offering anything unique that we can cut.
Well, we have to.
So you
There's
could,
still more to cut.
There's still
We're
more
not
to
there.
cut. We're not there.
you could reduce the number of times kids get phys ed, or reduce the amount of time kids get art.
I think they only get it
Without-
twice a week.
Are they at the state minimum?
2 PEs, 2 art.
2 arts, right?
Are you
Right.
saying you'd have to then share an art teacher among the elementary schools?
Some
Some
districts
do.
do.
Right, right, but that, ultimately where you'd be going, I would imagine. Because you're cutting an FTE, let's say, in art, and you have to figure out a way to serve those kids still.
Years ago, we didn't have instrumental music at the elementary. It was only choral. So that's the reduction, how it was reduced years ago. I'm not saying that that's the way to go. Or the tech, which I believe we do a great job with tech. Do we look at shifting the tech where they're not getting less tech than what they previously got? So all of the STEAM programming, all the robotics that are going on at the elementary.
I would just say this, if any place not to cut, it's elementaries. I mean, that's your foundation, that's where you're exploring and learning and getting your foundation. I mean, I just can't see the sense in cutting at the elementary.
And we
That's
have-
my personal, I'm
I
not an
agree.
educator.
No, I agree with you, I think I agree. Unfortunately, a lot of folks look at it like, well, what were the most important classes you took were what you took in high school in order to get into college or wherever you're going.
But I learned everything
But I
I need to
agree.
know in life, I learned in kindergarten.
I've written a book on it, or a few at this point.
Okay,
No, I
so,
agree with you, but I feel like we've already done that, not just in Berlin, but collectively as a society, we've eliminated science and social studies for the most part at the elementary schools. So now we're just gonna be teaching math and language arts.
Those poor kindergartners will be sitting still all day.
Well, I will tell you, I came from an elementary school where they didn't have art, and they only had music once a week, and they had music and PE, and I'm gonna tell you, we had so many behavioral issues. The students had a 20-minute recess, because they didn't wanna pay for people to be out on recess. That was it. They had music once a week, PE once or twice a week, no library media center, no art, and I'm gonna tell you, I've never seen so many students misbehave because they had no outlet.
well, if you go the other way around then, okay, so let's flip it and say, then you want to cut from the upper levels. So the FTEs would come out of the high school, let's say. If it comes out of the high school, it's going to be elective areas. If you're cutting 200,000, because we're still 200 short, $200,000 worth of elective.
125.
120, oh, because it's 75. So you're still talking 2 teachers at least, 2 FTEs come out of the high school. And then potentially more if the budget's defeated, if the referendum's defeated.
Don't forget, we already have potentially 6 teachers.
Right, so now you're at 8 or 9 even. Is it-
Right,
Right,
yeah.
correct. So my point is, we just adopted the new graduation requirements. We're continuing to call for 27 credits. if you're cutting all these places, most of these cuts are gonna be from elective areas. Can you even get to 27 anymore? Do we have to revamp what we're looking at for graduation credits at the high school?
What's the minimum requirement?
25, starting next year. We do 27 and a half for several years now. But if you don't offer certain elective areas, it's gonna make it more and more difficult to acquire those credits. Because you're not offering 5 tech ed, you get rid of 1 tech ed teacher or 1 music teacher, that's 5 classes that are gone.
Well, one thing that concerns me with cutting, now shifting gears from elementary school to middle school, thinking about cutting McGee Sports, now talking about cutting the specials and thinking about phys ed, is now, if we're cutting McGee Sports, and then we're cutting phys ed somewhere in McGee, because this is where the conversation seems to be going, then what are we doing for the students? So it does get concerning when we start cutting phys ed, art, music, at elementary and middle school.
Or I need to bring back ESS.
No, but if you think
Every
about
cut,
it,
I'm just saying.
no matter what level we cut at, there's a domino effect of other issues that we're gonna be dealing with, there's no
Exactly, yeah.
question.
Especially today's
There's
society.
no painless cut here.
I mean, in all honesty, I completely concur with Adam with respect to cutting at the elementary school. I worry about that because if kids don't gain sort of the foundational skills early on, you have nothing upon which to build, right? It's like, how do we expect to cultivate the next great mathematician or scientist if in which case, you know, if they're not getting science until they're in 7th grade? Like, you haven't planted those seeds and allowed time for them to germinate.
So
I
Well,
do agree that cutting at the
what I'm
elementary school is
hearing
scary.
is that this is, we're not ready to really adopt these kind of reductions of specials. What do you call it at the middle school? Exploratories, and some of the stuff at the
Or
high
even
school
phys ed.
right now.
So, I mean, look, what we're all saying is we don't like any of this, okay? So, I mean, I think we got it. We got it. I don't think we're getting anywhere with that. The truth is that either we cut or we raise money,
I'll get to that,
okay?
but I wanna identify where we're gonna
I
cut
think you
first,
add another
and see if we can
125 to
offset.
the certified salaries. It's too much.
how many retirements do we have?
They're already built into the budget.
They're already built in.
They're already built
But
in. You
what
haven't
I'm-
gotten any
what I'm-
since?
What I'm doing right now is holding retirements before we replace them and know we have the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the cuts, the idea is that we don't want, the last thing we wanna do is displace a bunch of current teachers, because in hiring new teachers, we'll say, why would I come to Berlin? Every year, the budget doesn't pass till May. They cut 5, if we cut another 8 teachers this year, we'll be averaging 5 teachers a year the last 6 years. So every year, there's 5 teachers that have gotten cut the last 6 years. So to answer your question,
Well,
we
yeah.
have about 5 positions, I believe, Julia, right now, that are.
Well, yeah,
But
it's-
some of those positions need to be filled, they're already tied to enrollment, and that we have to have people in those positions. Otherwise, the enrollment would be, over 25 at the elementary, and the enrollment in some classes wouldn't be able to run in high school.
So then let's cut school security, so we can have teachers.
We don't, that's not our money.
Right, it comes out of a different fund,
That's
yeah,
not our money, that was
I know.
John's.
that was it.
that was John's
Sorry,
point.
It's been a long day.
All right, so I'll put it on the table. Move certified salaries and benefits to 625, not 500, and there's your 125. And leave it to Brian to determine the FTEs.
Before we go there, I want you guys to consider something.
Good luck, Brian.
The last 5 years, we cut 22, now we'll be up to 30, no big
Right,
deal.
that's 5 years, Julia.
I want to, 2 other things to consider. And Brian talked to me about what this is gonna look like, is we do have a 10-month administrator at the middle school. That, it's an assistant principal that we could reduce
Reduce to what?
0.
What's our current administration in middle school?
1 principal, 1
112.
12-month, 1 10-month.
So there's just 2 total.
2 total.
So you're
Well,
getting rid
and
of
then,
the
you know what,
assistant
that will make
principals
people
then.
quiet,
Are the
time to
3?
complain that we're
Okay.
principal instead.
I'm tired of saying that as a 12-month.
I know. I'm being sarcastic.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
And the other one is and I hate to bring this one up too, but is we do have the two special ed coordinators or supervisors, whatever their title is. We could go to one. And I feel like there are two options that are out there that we need to consider and weigh against.
What would the salary of one be?
Salary's about $125,000.
So then, this is what we could do. We could put $125,000 in administration and let Brian decide.
You like that softball better?
You know what, though?
That was a hard one. Sorry, Brian.
Let me just say this budget is our budget, and frankly, it's not fair to put
No, I
Brian in
know.
that position. Is we need to identify what these cuts are,
But that's a reduction.
and
Just the
and
two.
go from
With
there.
the exception of the teacher piece, because I think that's, an FTE is a very complex diagram. So I would agree, I think for the FTEs, it's gotta be Brian and the administrators making the decision.
Agreed. So can I-
Agreed, yes.
Could I just make a couple statements on the administrators? The model that we first had in special education, we had PPT coordinators. That model was actually more expensive than the current model having two administrators. So to remove the special education supervisor, we have to have someone that monitors the PPT. We'd be out of compliance with the state, potentially being fined, and it would mean that the number of PPTs that are covered, if you look at their schedule, it's, you know, with where our special education population is, there's a lot of PPTs. So that's what special ed. Could it be done in a different model? Yes, but I'm saying that we're saving money with the current model. It may not be the same as other districts, but we are definitely saving money. As far as the administrator goes at McGee, if you look at the number of referrals that come out of any school for discipline, I hate to say that McGee, that age and McGee, now they're not always the most serious referrals, but with students getting in trouble, social issues, and also students being in crisis, McGee is definitely the school that has a lot of that. So either one is gonna have an impact, you know, an impact on either area. So, I mean, we can put it up there, I can have the conversations, but it definitely will have an impact, and again, there will have to be some shoring up of those positions if either one was cut. I don't think we could just absorb it and move on the same way. Whether it's, you know, ability to address students' needs at the middle school,
What would that look like?
I don't know what.
If we took that administrator away, what would you need?
Well, in some districts, they'll have a person who teaches a lighter load, and then does some administrative work also, it's not the same. You know, I'd have to talk with Linda here to talk about PPS, what it might look like without that. I know Linda shared with me that, she'll hang a sign on her door, she won't ever be here, she'll be on PPTs. She'll have PPTs out of the district, because number of out-of-district PPTs that we're required to attend is great. So, you know, at McGee, the ability to do more of the work and not just in PPTs, because administrators and all the PPTs at McGee, and handle discipline, that assistant principal will handle exclusively discipline, that will be most of the day, the number of referrals that come through. You know, they probably average somewhere at 15 to 20 referrals a day at the middle school for various, you know, they're not always the most severe, but they're, you know, issues that students are having.
So, all right, so let's talk about the middle school administrator. What would you need to offset that?
PBIS would help, but PBIS would help, but it's also the number of evaluations that they do. They're not department heads at the middle school, they're at the high school, so the administrators do all the evaluations. Now you're taking those evaluations.
Cindy does all the special ed,
Right.
Yeah, they don't do special.
Right, but you're talking about 9 people there, but you're still talking about every other teacher at McGee would be done by the 2 instead of the 3. So that's one part. That's not as easy as just having someone else come in. We can look to, we have shifted some to Cara and Lori, so we can look to that. But just the day-to-day workings, you know, would be impacted.
What about if you were to, instead of cut one over the other, make one 50-50? Because all you need is an 092. I understand you need a background with special ed, but.
Yeah, it's a different model to think about.
I think it would be maybe a bumpy road at first and a tough transition.
There are other issues, because it's a 10-month position and a 12-month position, and we need the 12-month position for special ed summer school to cover the,
So in
It covers
this,
the high school
Yes,
PTA.
right, so in this scenario, that we would eliminate the 10-month position, and that 12-month person would have to cover 50/50 or 70, whatever it comes out to, 70/12, 7/12. Those needs.
But then it would just be a new position created and the person with the seniority, right? Is that how the administrative union works?
You'd be eliminating the 10-month.
Be
The 10
eliminating the 10-month.
But could people?
Then you'd be eliminating
wouldn't
PPS,
that
would be a new position.
But could
Not
it be-
sure.
Oh, they can't bump it.
Right now, is it current practice that the administrators, the APs of the middle school, principals at the elementary, do they go to PPTs, or is it only the special ed coordinators that are going as the administrators?
Administrators go up.
Okay.
What happens to the person in the 10-month if we eliminate that position? Are they simply out of a position, or do they have the option
Unless
to
there's
bump
some position
into
opens up.
the teachers?
I would offer them, if I had a teaching position that they were qualified for, I would definitely offer that position. I wouldn't want to just bump them out.
What if then, through retirements, vacancies, whatever is gonna happen in the middle school, do similar to what we did at the elementary school with the teacher leader, I can't remember what we called it. But half administrator, half teacher, still 10 months, reduction in salary.
It's not a great reduction. It's a little, you're not gonna say 125.
Right.
You know, it's gonna be a little bit of a reduction.
What are the teacher, just,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, if
sure.
we can entertain this question.
Yep.
What are the teacher leader, what does that job look like in terms of duties right now?
So they would be doing some intervention work with students,
Okay.
and then doing some of the evaluations administrative. So it's,
All right.
it's someone who is just leaving the, because there's not a lot of elementary assistants. And a lot of, unless it's a large elementary, so it allows someone to transition into the administrative, some of the roles, get behind the scenes, and then we didn't think it would be a long-term position.
Right.
We thought it would be a 2 to 3 year position, they would move on. So you get a phenomenal teacher who wants the next layer, it's a great entry-level spot.
Sure.
And we're benefiting because we're not paying an administrative salary for that. So the intervention work they're doing in each building is different based on the needs of the building, but they're working with staff, but they're also working directly with students too.
Thank you.
So it seems like we're either talking about one administrator or two teachers, really. Unless there's another alternative I haven't thought of.
Brian, would you consider working pro bono next year?
Thanks, Tim.
I think he almost did now.
Yep, don't have to.
First Rich, Julie, Tim, thanks.
Sorry,
That's
Brian,
okay,
just
no.
throwing them at you,
Yeah,
Steve.
you know, I mean,
Hey, my parents had sent me a bunch of old newspapers years ago, and the 1987 Berlin Board of Education was dealing with a 14% budget increase.
Wow.
So, that didn't pass either, but. We're going to the old days. Fees?
Well, that's next, I just wanted to know if we've got a reduction here, so.
You know, we're not gonna raise $120,000 in fees.
No, I know.
So, I think that Rich's point is correct, is we're talking either about the 10-month position at the middle school, or we're talking about two teachers, two more FTEs.
I'm assuming
Well,
there's
it's not
nothing here at central
necessarily.
office that's
Wait,
not.
why are we saying it's either the 10-month or two teachers? Why isn't it the 10-month or the 12-month, as one or the other, or two teachers?
What do you mean, the 12?
I think Linda said we need the 12-month for
Because there's
special
summer
ed.
school for
But
special ed.
there's two.
Right, but,
We have to keep the 12-month for special ed.
and we already, I thought that
So
we
would
just
either-
addressed that if we take, because of how many meetings that they have to go to now, if we take it out, they can't cover everything. There's not enough, and in the old model, it would cost us, if we went back to the old model where there were what were they called?
PPT coordinators, what happened is,
The PPT coordinators, we paid them more than what we did have with,
so you had one that had a 92, so they were paid on top of that, they both had all their years, and they both did, Linda, would you say 20 extra days a year? Is that unreasonable to say, 15 extra days a year? Coordinators did?
I think so, but they attended every single
Right,
PPT, your administrators.
So you still had your director, you had a supervisor that handled all the out-of-district PPTs, and you had your coordinators handle all the in-district PPTs. So you really had 4, people working in out of the district.
Well, when I was a supervisor, I did K to 21.
Well, okay, right.
One of the PPT coordinators covered preschool and did all of elementary, and Margaret did the out of district, the director.
And has it always been, and is it currently the case that a special ed administrator and a building administrator are both present at a meeting?
No, it's either or usually.
Okay, that's what, okay, because that's what I thought I'd heard before, and I thought that was.
That's what I was asking, I just wanted to be sure that.
Yeah, I mean, for
That's-
those tough cases, we do.
Right,
We'll
oh,
have-
yeah.
Before,
All intimately aware, yes.
before we had, well, as an assistant at the middle school, there was an assistant principal at every PPT when I was there, as well as a coordinator when they had the PPT coordinators. I think, if you're looking at administrative cuts, then you're willing to, let me look at what model would best fit, if that's what you think it should be. I mean,
So I guess my question is, right, and this is, I guess, where I stand, and obviously I don't wanna cut anything in education, but if we're cutting certified salaries, we're cutting teachers, pulling them out of the classroom, cutting special ed significantly, more than anything else here, right? Then we're cutting supplies, McGee, freshmen, stipends. How are we not touching administrators? I'm not saying we have to, but it just, again, we're getting rid of teachers, we're impacting the students. Is there any leverage? Is there anything in there? Other than Brian working pro bono, which isn't gonna happen.
well,
I think, I think the answer is just what Brian said, and that's that if we're gonna take out an administrator, then we put the number down and let him decide what model's gonna work.
That's very sad.
Because I didn't wanna dump it on him, but he just volunteered, so that's a whole different.
so that's my job.
Tracy.
I was actually gonna agree with her. Ask that question. I was gonna ask the same thing. Not that I believe we should, but I feel like we're impacting kids so much. Is there a way to?
And it still impacts kids, right?
It does.
Not as many kids are gonna be handled from a disciplinary point of view, all
I know.
of that's gonna take longer.
There'll be more Berlin Buzz Facebook posts about
I
buses.
don't care about, I don't care about.
I'm kidding, man.
I just want to say one thing about the administrators. Administrators, right, there's 18.6 administrators in Berlin. So when you take one out, you go to 17.6, you're taking 5% of the administrators out of the districts, right? So when you take staff of 5 out of 240 something, it's not that great. So you're taking a whole position out. You know what I'm trying to say? The magnitude of that is large.
And we took 2 out last year.
Year. And one the year before, right?
No.
No, we
No,
shifted
2,
last year.
last year, year before,
Last year and the year before.
Last year and the year
shifted
before.
one.
There may not be, I just have a question.
Yep.
Last year, we took out the 2 assistants, and we replaced them with team leaders,
Teacher leadership.
teacher leaders, okay. Is there a way we can kinda do something
That's what I
like?
was saying, that's what I was saying.
That,
Where it's
like-
not a full all
Right, like
FTE,
it's a,
it's a partial, so you could say, yeah, there's a savings, it's not gonna be $125,000, it might be
Right.
$50,000 savings.
okay.
But I would like you to let me talk and, think about how to do that, come back to you with
I was
something.
just curious.
Yeah,
It's a way
there's a definite way, that's what I'm saying, not taking the whole position, because the magnitude is greater than 100%.
What's the point six?
What's that?
The 0.6 out of the 18.6?
Denise Parsons, HR, is shared
Yes,
between
he's
the
in
town and us downstairs, so that's the 0.6.
Yeah.
So, before we get to the next topic, is if we're taking administration out, we need to put a number up on the board that's there.
Are we taking
Would
it
it make
out?
more sense to put it in the certified salaries, which includes administration?
But if we talk specifically
But
about admin.
it's particularly looking at admin and isolated that way, so we understand what it is.
Brian, does the 10-month make more than 100,000?
Yes.
And I think that's also, to Matt's point, important for the people in town to see, right? Because this is written down. They're gonna see 600,000 in certified salaries and say, teachers. It's not, you know, it's a different bargaining group, it's a different contract, it's different position.
the whole 100,000 because he needs something else for the model.
I was gonna say,
Unless the
what are you
model
gonna,
changes.
are you gonna take 50? Is it 75? I mean, I don't know what the number is. If you're looking at a different model, of the 125, if 50, could the position be filled at 75,000, so there's a $50,000 savings, or?
It might be able to get 50, 30, 40, I mean, I gotta see what we can work with, how much of it has to be administration still, and how much would be. The difficulty is you're not gonna find, typically you're not gonna find a .6 person to come in, you're gonna have to have something else on that to make it a 1-0.
How many kids are, what's the student population at McPhee Branch? Do you know?
Yeah, we're-
700?
Yeah,
But why-
about 700.
A lot.
700.
I wanna go revisit Julia's model, is why can't we take that position and take a reduction, somewhat of a time reduction on the special ed side and use it in both places?
You mean one?
To redraft it as an assistant principal / PPS supervisor that would do secondary, and then, they would be at McGee. You might be able to do something like that. I mean, it's still a matter of the person's time and,
Because then we're talking about $100,000 reduction there.
The candidate pool may be very shallow of people who have an expertise in both areas.
Might be someone from within.
Maybe.
And effectively, if you're saying it would be a 50-50, or not 50-50, whatever percentage it would end up having to be, the person would occupy the special ed supervisor position and the middle school
They're
assistant principal, right, shared
responsibility.
responsibility. So the individual's time to, like, some portion of their time would be sitting both as the assistant principal and as the special ed supervisor in those
Right,
meetings.
which would be right.
I mean, that would be feasible, not,
No, that's
Preferable.
that's a positive of it, yes.
right, that's the one.
Right, two
One
becomes one,
upside.
right, that's an upside, no doubt.
I think you can make
Not
that
much to,
work. I think you can make that work. I mean, I'm just, not that any of this is workable, and I hate to keep saying the same thing, but I oversee the 9th grade, 520 kids, it's just me. And I do all the discipline, and I go to, 75 PPTs a year, or whatever it might be as well. It's not easy, granted, it's not easy. But it may be something that we could work, if we were to cut the 10-month and then merge positions together somehow. It might be feasible. You'd have to study that a lot more to determine the numbers and what it means.
No, I'd have to look at it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I think we should put the position on there.
So a full 125,000 savings?
Is that what we're saying that position is worth?
Yes,
The middle school 10-month administrator is 125?
it's somewhere around, I can get the exact number.
Well, we got our 1.7.
Yeah, we need more.
125?
I know.
That was just to get to heat, that's just
I
to get
know,
to where
I know.
we think we are. We need more.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Middle
Off
school
this- off this
administrator,
topic.
or just administration?
Administration.
10-month.
10-month administration.
When we
Could
looked
just
at,
say, okay,
Or one.
sure,
Administration?
Sure, administration.
Administration.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
How to structure it.
when we looked at the elementary schools and did the study, there wasn't a savings at the time by closing Hubbard. One suggestion they did have is doing a redistricting to shut down the temporary classrooms that were in Griswold. So that would involve redistricting, moving people from Griswold into Willard, moving some of those students from Willard into Hubbard to redistrict. Is there any savings associated with closing down the temporary buildings if we did that?
The savings would be mechanical savings, you're still gonna need the staff.
Sure. But are there any mechanical
Not
savings?
at this point, I mean, the savings is that the systems that are in there are not as energy efficient as the other systems, they're 20 years old. So that part in time, those are gonna, the problem we're gonna run into, in time, those 4 classrooms at Griswold are going to need to be renovated and updated, and they're not meant, they're portables, not meant for a long-term life. And that's what he was saying, that they're getting near end of life, so at some point, you're gonna have that issue to contend with. The bigger cost savings with the whole part of redistricting is the banding of grade levels. And it's not something that, the banding meaning, so, you know, taking, instead of having 2 classrooms at Hubbard, 4 at Griswold, 4 at Willard, and 5 at Griswold at a grade level, you would then take them in one school, and now you can disperse the students over those 9 classrooms, I think it's 9, no, 11 classrooms, and you may be able to eliminate a staff member, because then you could now disperse the students, where you have 36 students at Hubbard, you're gonna have 2 classrooms, not with 36 in one, right? Though if you have that, where there's 4 classrooms, you're able to.
So, that conversation is a very real conversation that needs to stay in the forefront of our future agendas, not for budget year 19 and 20, but for 20 and 21. Because we're gonna have this exact same conversation next year, and I think that the concept of closing Hubbard is very real in 2021.
Well, and I think if there's people in town who are quoted saying, we're going to close a school, people are obviously rallying around that idea.
Well, and then,
Unfortunately.
but we also have held a public forum, and we had 10 times more people asking, saying absolutely not.
So,
I know.
And our study says absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
So just to break it down, I mean, yes, if we closed Hubbard, it would- I mean, first of all, a couple more years of 1 and change percent, I think it's inevitable that it's gonna happen. In the interim, to the question is specifically about the redistricting, is that something we should do? I mean, it's not gonna be a giant savings, but is that something?
I think
we
you
would
look at
do?
some savings, but you're gonna hear from the community, which, you know, I bought this house to be in this school, I want this school.
Well, we also hear from the community of all these things that
Right.
they wanted to.
But my thought is that it's a community school, right? You have some people saying, let's, you know, shut down a school. But I still believe there's people in the community, based on the survey, that want the schools to stay the way they are. What has to happen, as we all know, is getting off that 1.38 and getting to a reasonable number like we used to have, where we can maintain instead of reducing every year.
Practically, how do you add 200 and some odd kids to schools that are already busting at the seams? You have
You-
larger class sizes and all of
You have
those.
larger class sizes, but if you think about it, let's take a grade level at Hubbard. I'm just gonna hypothetically say there's, you know, 36 kids at a grade level. And I said there were, you know, 2 sections there, and now there's 9 in the other 2 schools. Now you're gonna disperse 36 over 9, it's 4 students per classroom. You're
Right,
gonna add.
right.
So they're
You
gonna
just
go-
increase class
That's
sizes,
by
is what I'm
force, that's
saying,
right,
not,
right,
I mean,
right.
we don't have additional classrooms to give out.
Well, there may be some like Willard we've had in the, you know, in the building and site for 2 years now to do those classrooms downstairs in Willard.
Yeah.
And do you move classrooms that weren't classrooms back to classrooms that are now offices? It's not, you know, it's a huge shift to community schools. And the town, you know, from the survey, people like community schools.
Well,
And-
again, if we surveyed them on, do they like sports, do they like
Right.
after-school activities, they like that too. So the point
They
is
also
that,
like school security.
and people like that too, if we survey
And
them.
good.
I guess, a specific question on, understand you are not ready to displace every single student and band, which obviously has some opportunities. We're not ready to do that right now, but in terms of the minor redistricting, to be able to shut down those portables, is there any cost realized?
At this point, there's not gonna be huge savings realized, there's not. We may be able to eliminate a teacher, we could say, if we take the line, we draw it here, we'll swoop these 20 kids in for right now, but the next year it's gonna change.
Sure.
You know, because you don't know. You don't know.
I'm talking about the physical,
No, the physical, no, we're not.
shutting down the portables.
No, we're not gonna save, other than the energy clause, we're not gonna save.
And that comes out of capital, right?
No, the energy clause, no, for operation.
Operation.
So we're not gonna save that. What it would do, only Jake, is we could then, so like, you know, if Hubbard enrollment was going down, at one point, there were 20 some odd choice students went to Hubbard, to elevate it back over a little over 200. So if we redistrict and we know there's a subdivision going in, we could then push that to a school that's enrollment might be down. And for those, why there's a school age, it'll flourish that area. That's the only thing it does. The Griswold piece is something to keep on the back burner, because they're thinking ahead. They're gonna need work. They're not structurally the same, they're not built the same way that they have their own heating and air conditioning systems. They're not tied back into the building. They're not meant for forever.
One of those vacation jeans to the meeting.
All right, well, we still don't have, well, I guess we got to 1.7, which is part of what we accomplished. Let's talk about revenues that could come in.
I'm gonna start a new page?
Yep.
And add that?
Just flip it. So, look, we can implement parking fees at Berlin High School. There are many districts that have parking fees. We are not obligated to provide free parking. We are obligated to provide free transportation.
One comment I have on that, so last week, well, the week before vacation, I was out on a desk visit the school I did it. They do a quarterly fee of $50 a quarter. So that way, if you get your license the end of the year, and this is a town that they are in like Derg F. Like, they're not like Berlin. And they get the money and the kids pay the money and it's not an issue. So $50 a quarter and it's working. So I found that to be interesting.
So, I think that we can implement a parking fee. I think that it's fair.
$200 a year. $200 a quarter.
No.
No.
How many spots do we have? Do we have a number?
And what I would say to this is, I'm not saying that we start at $200 a year or $50 a quarter, but I'm saying that we start somewhere. The number that comes to me is $100 for a year, $25 a
A
quarter.
quarter.
$25,000.
That way
It's probably
it's gonna be licensed for the
$20,000.
winter.
Yeah, because you're not gonna have to buy off 4 quarters.
Correct. It's
Yeah.
probably about
Right.
$20,000. Rough estimate, $100 times 200 cars for the year is $20,000 that we could have as a revenue stream coming in. Does that offset any one single line item on the other side? No, but it is revenues that are coming in that help us offset something. And I think that that's those are the conversations that we need to have.
Well, the hard part is that somebody has to police that, which would normally be an administrator.
That we just
That we're
eliminate.
But somebody's gotta pay attention, because otherwise you'll have kids parking and not paying anything, and
Well, that's
That's part of our
We
security.
were just asking that. How are
Security,
you
but
gonna
that
do
would be,
that?
but that would be
Things happen harm.
part of the responsibilities for the security people that we would be
Yes.
doing that.
You're right, you're right.
Does it make more sense to do a semester and do 50-50, so it's not as much accounting?
Sure. We can administrate it any way we
Right.
like.
So,
We don't currently restrict.
Just add
our
in
seniors
50 a
or anything, don't
semester?
we?
no, I
Okay.
think that's good.
Families would have to
But how
park.
do you implement that? Through stickers?
Yeah.
So every semester they gotta get a new sticker?
That's halfway through the year, you have to get a new, or you buy,
Think about that
you
anyway.
buy it for the year, you're driving for the year, buy the $100 one. But that just allows someone who gets their license to
Half.
drive, to not pay $100 for the year, they're giving, they're only paying half.
Oh, they have to get a
Okay.
parking
That was
permit
none of that.
now.
Especially juniors, there are a lot of kids.
Yeah, they have to have a parking permit now, it's just free.
So we're anticipating, should we put the number we're anticipating to get $20,000 from that? Is that fairly correct?
That's fair.
That's not your math right here?
That's my scratch math,
Yeah, okay, just checking it's your math.
That's my math.
And we can talk about paying to participate for co-curriculars, not just athletics, but if you're in the play, there's a fee, for all of for everything. You're shaking your head, Matt.
No, it's just, I know we're going down the road, I hate when everyone doesn't have equal opportunity and it comes back in a public school, it just seems so against what the public school.
I've never been in favor of pay to play, or pay to participate, whatever you wanna call it, because really, the next thing it's gonna be, you're gonna be buying your own textbooks or offsetting the cost for the textbooks and supplies. I mean, I just, the parking thing, I guess I could live with, because that's a choice, but to ask people to pay to belong to a club. I
$20,
just-
$30.
No, any money doesn't make, I don't care what the dollar figure is, I have a problem with it overall. I just don't think it's
Right,
right.
some of these activities are already fundraising, you're already paying. I mean, when the kids are in the drama club or they're doing the play, they're all mandated to go out and fundraise to try to augment, because we're not funding it completely as it is.
What about students in DECA? I don't know if anyone here knows the answer to
Right,
this.
I know, that's even.
I don't know if anyone has kids in DECA,
Yeah.
but do they have to pay their dues,
That
or
was
is
my
the district
point,
paying their
actually,
dues?
because they're already doing a lot of
They
that.
fundraise for it.
They fundraise for it, right, so that goes into, like, if
No,
they can
no,
fundraise,
still
and
have to
show up for the
fundraise.
fundraise.
That's just the
that
Board of
pays-
Ed component of that.
No,
Thinking off of what Adam said, you know, I don't like any of it anyway, but I also want to give them an outlet for every child, even the ones that can't afford it or something. Like if there was a, I mean, if we do that, we'd have to have scholarships for them or something, because you have to have equal opportunity. But today with, especially getting rid of the SS and everything, we gotta give them an outlet somewhere. So I don't know, I don't know, if they need something, like,
Yeah, go ahead.
I look at this differently. I look at raising funds on these things gives them a better opportunity to have the outlet at all. We're talking about eliminating all these outlets. We're talking about eliminating all the sports for middle school. By actually raising some funds around these, it actually allows that opportunity at all. And again, if you look at other districts, it's very common to have fees for sports. I mean, you go right into, you sign up for any one of the sports, there's a place for paying for it. I mean, we're actually equipped to do that because many of the districts do that. Now, absolutely, we can go and say, you know, maximum caps for if you have multiple kids. You could certainly do if you're on reduced lunch, not give them the same opportunity, but not having them pay that. But again, we're talking about removing these opportunities. I prefer to be like other districts that actually have participate on the
You're going,
funding.
Jake, if we cut middle school sports, if we cut McGee Sports and say we're gonna offer, what's it called?
Intramurals.
Intramurals instead, you know you're gonna have a group of parents who are gonna say, we wanna pay to keep this. I'm just saying,
I'm talking about
I
high school right
understand.
now. I'm talking about high school, the existing high school sports that we are not, that we still have. Why not raise the funds against those? I don't think that eliminates the opportunity.
but you're saying to be able to join the musical, you gotta pay first.
Well, I'm saying.
And then you gotta raise money.
Well, no, I'm not even saying that. I'm saying if you want to be in, many of the high school sports, you want to be in, I mean, what do we pay for football? You know? What do we pay for any of these things? Many of the districts, if I'm not mistaken, the people who participate in sports pay a fee for it.
So there's a
It's
lot
not,
of
it's not only
different-
sports, it's also co-curricular activities,
Yeah,
so
so,
it would not be sports, it'd be band, it'd be, you know, it'd be very, it's not, well, some it's just sports. There's usually a cap for every district, and there's difference, I've seen caps at $1,000 per family.
Well, we don't have to do it,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
$1,000 cap.
it's-
there's,
I don't think it's unreasonable to
in
have a $100 fee for,
in traveling around a lot of districts in New England, which is what now I do, that's a question that I ask, that has nothing to do with what I do, but I ask the question for knowledge. And what I'm finding is there are many, many districts that simply charge an activity fee, in essence, to every student. So, at the beginning of the year, it's $100, and I'm just throwing that number out there, whether you're.
To participate
It
in
covers
anything you want.
like everything, right? Some would do it just, it's a one-time fee for the year. Others, it's per season, if you will. So if you're active in the winter, that's where you pay the $100. But they just have it's a blanket for everything. So if you run cross-country and you're in the band, that fee that they collect covers that's your fee. And so in essence, you're putting a $100 fee on every student, and they started actually at the middle school, and move up, because that's where things, clubs and activities and so forth start. So take your school population times $100, and that's what you're generating.
I think that's really risky. I think also,
Risky, why?
because then you're either gonna get people who are saying, I'm not paying and I'm not doing anything.
But you're gonna have that anyway.
I don't know, like, I don't know, and I think also people have too much pride when it comes to money in difficult financial situations. They're not gonna submit their papers for free or reduced lunch, they're not gonna say they need help when they do, and they're gonna put on the facade of everything is okay on the outside, but like, we're falling apart on the inside. And I think that's where we're not gonna reach the students. I also know that in the district I work in, it is pay to participate for everything. So every season, they have to pay their $30. If they don't have the $30, they can let someone know. But also the club, I advise, every single student has to pay their own dues. However, if they participate in the fundraiser, that money can go towards their dues. Except, because of this, for sports, for bands, for clubs, for everything, now there's limitations on how many fundraisers every club is allowed to do per year. Every sport and club, and they're limited, and they have to do that because now you're draining your whole entire community. You're draining your neighbors, your parents, your everyone. So everyone has to pay. Oh, if you don't want to pay and want to fundraise, but now, like, we have limits on fundraisers. I know Berlin doesn't.
Yep. Yes, they do. Yes, we do. Absolutely.
Do they?
Yes, absolutely.
What are they?
Each sport is allowed one fundraiser per season.
What about clubs?
Clubs, I don't know.
There you go.
I don't know about those sports, you know, about those.
Well, that's actually good. They don't just do a
And everything I just
Right.
heard sounds very confusing.
But I think it's not
Just
very
for that tonight.
I really feel, I agree with that. I'm just, in my gut, I feel very uncomfortable about charging families too, and for the reasons that you stated, Brian, too. I feel like it does create sort of an unequal, not sort of, an unequal
I guess
opportunity
the other position
It
is
just
that
doesn't feel like honest public
if
education.
you had students and they went through the district, your taxes funded athletics and co-curricular. So now the next generation, you're gonna make those families who have students in the district almost pay, it's
Pay on
additional
top of
tax
it,
on
right.
top of something that others got back then. It may be, sign of the times, but it just feels,
Well, and let's not forget, according to the latest numbers that I saw in the paper, a decent number of homes in this town are gonna have their taxes increase $300 to $400 at least. And I have 3 kids. Now, my kids are already through the system, but if I had 3 kids in the system, that's another $300 that I gotta pay out, in addition to the $450 that I'm paying in additional taxes.
But then if you're struggling to pay your mortgage, then your kids aren't gonna have these
Those
opportunities.
numbers that you're talking about don't touch any of the things we
I
just
know.
took out of the system.
I know,
Well, and so that's part of the problem
they're
is,
not putting back anything that we're
if
taking
we
out.
sit there and look at the McGee kids, 350 unique athletes, you're looking at just a hair under $300 per kid
Mhm.
to fund the $103,700 of McGee sports, which is exactly where those 350 kids' parents are going to expect that money to go. Not to any of the other reduction items on page 1 of teachers and administrators and things like that, which is where we're probably thinking
Pool of money.
the pool of money is going to go. Exactly. If we raise $103,000 from McGee athletes, families, they're expecting the athletic programs to continue as they are. And that's not going to.
That was what I was saying before, which is if we cut McGee sports, you're gonna have a group of parents who are gonna say, we want pay to perform, pay to participate.
So we'll pay.
Tell me, yeah, we are willing to pay. How do you do it? Logistically, it becomes a nightmare, but you're gonna have to figure some system out.
But that's the issue, is this revenue item,
That's
when it comes to
fine.
co-curriculars,
Do we
whether
accept
it's
the
athletics or not,
implemented?
are gonna be limited in many cases to that item.
I don't know how we can,
People are gonna push back
I don't
and say,
know how
"We're
we
not
can
gonna do it."
do without putting something back that we're taking out, without having a direct connection like you're talking about, something that we're removing. I don't know how you can do the $100 or whatever it is.
Right.
Because then it's just money that goes into the pool.
The idea, I'm sure, would be, all right, if we can raise 125, we'll put the 10-month administrator back.
I agree, then go out and
But
Fundraising, want that money.
fundraising with athletics is not gonna be
Yeah.
okay with it.
We just gonna wrap this, tighten it up a little bit. What is the goal tonight?
We always put these items that we are willing to back.
Okay, so you've got 170,000 in cuts. You've got 20,000 in revenue.
1.7 million. Got 1.7 million.
1.7 million in cuts. You've got 20,000 in revenue. What else are you looking for?
The only other revenue stream that I see is to charge the preschool peer models that come in.
I don't know what that means.
It's a small number.
It's like the
So, Brian, talk to that, please.
So our preschool is a half-day preschool, there's peer role models that get to go for half a day for free. I did speak to Linda about this, and Linda, you could share here that, Linda thought about this, but implementing it for the following year. It's not-
We already told our parents that it's free, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So there's
so,
no impact.
it's not a huge number either, it's really not good. Linda, how many role models do we have? You do AM, PM?
25.
Could you increase it? Not really.
Rocky Hill, I did some, Rocky Hill charges 2,000 for the year. Ellington charges AM one fee, PM another. So it's anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000
I mean,
per
and
kid.
this is just anecdotal, but,
No
you know,
transportation.
right, but in speaking with other parents, a lot of people would be more than willing and happy to
Yeah.
pay $2,000 a
That's,
year.
I was just saying, I
for
would have,
preschool to
Dante was
go.
the peer,
Absolutely, because
totally
they're
would have
paying for
paid.
it in daycare and other.
And it's a lot cheaper than
I would-
daycare, that's like a month's worth of
Yeah.
daycare.
It's crazy.
So that's $50,000 next year, at $2,000 a kid.
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't think it would be something that people would balk at.
I don't either, I just wanted to give them warning, because
Yeah,
we
yeah.
talked about
If
doing
you already
that.
told them it's free, you wouldn't care to change it.
No, and people don't have to submit to the lottery if they know that that's
That's
the
voluntary,
any cost
yeah.
associated.
Yeah.
I think we should do it regardless, it's the timing,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
because more and more districts are doing it.
Do we add this up here for the following year?
well, I mean,
This is for this year.
I wouldn't put it up there for
The other revenue source, and it won't go to us, but I wanna share with you, we tried to do it last year to, the Y is was using Moreland for their summer camp, Thunderbird, which used to be at McGee. We tried to put it back at McGee last year, and it was $20,000 in revenue from the camp using the school. There was a big issue between the town and, I thought that the school district would get the revenue, because it's our school. Last year, that the Park and Recs department claimed that there was a fee associated with renting the tennis courts, the soccer field, the softball field, the baseball field. So when it all came down, Park and Rec would get like $15,000 in rental fees for the fields, and the school would get less than $5,000.
Does that even cover custodial?
No, so we did move forward last year, they actually had a contract, they would have to get together. So this year, we're looking at renting, and it's Willard. I did speak to upstairs, and they're claiming that the revenue would go to the town. So regardless of the fields, the town's gonna get an extra $20,000, which is great. I don't know if they're gonna pass it back to us, but there's $20,000 of revenue that will be gained by renting Willard for summer school. They'll use the lower level only.
Camp?
The fields, camp for Camp Thunderbird. So, I mean, whether it's offset to our budget or the town, there's still $20,000 that the town didn't have before.
well, our experience so far is there's no offset to us.
No.
Just,
Do you want me to cross out the pay to participate? Or just leave that?
It's a question we're gonna have to address. You're going to get a group of parents who's going to come in and demand that we allow this so their kids can still have the sports.
So then do we just leave it here and not do anything with it until our next meeting?
Good.
But we have our cuts.
I think that we need to leave it up there,
leave it for the press.
but there's $1.7 million, or 1.7 million worth of cuts on there. As a board, do we stand by those decisions? Could you flip that? Do we stand behind these as a board but I think it's super important that we recognize there's some risk up there too.
There's considerable risk.
Yeah,
Because
significant risk.
I mean,
you have a
given the
second line
history,
item, and we know, going.
given the history and track record, I'd say we put another 5 certified salaries right now.
So just change it to,
Well, you're talking about some judicial
You say
cuts.
change it to 100.
No, you can't do that yet, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch it.
Wait till it hits, and then you say now more.
now
You're talking about the
more.
referendum failing, if it fails, is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
so this is,
Well, I know.
So what we didn't do is at 1.7 is there are no pieces to move. If the budget
passes as
Passes.
is.
ends right here, as it is today, that's 1.7 million, and that's the action we're taking. That's what we're saying.
And that's what we're doing.
Correct.
We're not gonna scramble and find money and fund things with end-of-year funds and.
None of that you can't.
Can't,
None of it
right,
can be.
perfect.
Even if there was money left over, none of it can be
ESS.
except ESS. That's the only
Only
thing
thing
there.
because it's been
That's the
consecutive
only
years.
thing, because it's a because it's a contract.
Contract.
Supplies and materials.
And supplies, true.
Supplies.
100,000. Well, this is a sad day.
It's a
Mhm.
sad day.
You know,
Really
sad.
and really, when we're talking about it, really, it's a race to the bottom, in my mind. It really is. I mean, and again, I'll go back to my time before I even had children in the system, working with the Board of Ed to make sure that things got reinstated, and programs were put back in, and how my kids are in the system in 9th, 7th, and 5th grade, and they're gonna lose out on all this. It really is sad. It's also sad that a lot of people that are making this decisions have short memories of when their own children were in the school system, and have a hard time with that. But, you know, if you look at where this is going, as education declines, quality of education declines with offerings, your home values will go down because people don't want to move into town. And you're starting to see it now. I'm not sure if you've noticed all the vacancies, the for sale signs on homes, the vacancies on storefronts, the amount of lack of economic development going on. A lot of these towns are able to incorporate a 2 or 3% increase without impacting the taxpayers because their grand list growth is going up to accommodate that. So we have no grand list growth, we have no economic development, we've got schools that are being underfunded, we've got capital to zero with no long-term plan on the town or the board side. We're making decisions between a security guard and a teacher in some cases, figuring out where we're gonna cut sports and stipends for some of these activities. I mean, sad. It really is pathetic that the town of Berlin, which once was very great, and a place where everyone wanted to be, now you're gonna see the exact opposite. So I hope everyone's happy with some of these reductions.
You know, Adam, it's interesting what you said, so I just, you know, it hits close to home in a very strange way. So I grew up in Massachusetts, one of the best towns on the South Shore, and it was one of the most expensive towns to live at, and I see the same exact thing happening here. So they needed a new high school, they got their new high school, same exact thing happens. I was looking them up in the paper last week because I knew they were up for NEAS, and they were put on warning, and they spend the lowest amount per pupil in the entire state of Massachusetts, but they're one of the wealthiest towns in Massachusetts. And it blows my mind. And as I read that, and as I see what's happening here, I know we're not the wealthiest town, but the same exact thing is happening. And I can't believe the school I graduated from, which was once the best in athletics, music, academics, is now put on warning by NEAS a few months ago. Didn't even pass. And I feel like this is what's happening to Berlin now. I think it's insane.
Well, unfortunately, this is where we are. And it's a sad day for us. I mean, this is, you know, we had people speak and say, stand your ground. We don't have ground to stand, we don't have ground to stand on because we don't control what happens after we put the budget out. We only get to make these decisions. and there's not one good decision on there. Every single one of those decisions impacts the students at the end.
So let's not leave this room without the optimist, and I've always been one. No, I'm born into the time of the pessimist, but the optimist says, you have to look at what the three choices are to vote for this budget, and what you're saying right now is, if it's voted to be approved, thank you, that's what you get. If you vote no, but you don't say no too low, you get that, and you get more. So what's the optimism? The only way to put a tourniquet on the bleeding is to say, vote no too low.
Too low.
That, this information is important to get out to the public. I'm not sure what the Board of Finance chair wants to do, but I have been encouraging him, pushing him, pleading with him to say, you need to have another budget hearing before the first referendum. Don't wait until after the first referendum, because you're gonna lose that opportunity. The only time that this can stop and be reversed to some extent is now.
But all we can do is put out all three models and say, these are the options. We can't recommend one model over the other. We can't legally.
You can say it.
Or we
But you can
cannot.
say
Now
it.
the referendum's been set.
No,
But
but
you
You've got
can.
parent groups that
I was
you've
gonna say,
spoken
the parents
to,
can say it.
and
Yeah.
these,
Right.
this.
I'm just saying that we can't publicly state
That's
that.
fair,
Right.
that's fair, but.
we can't say that we agree wholeheartedly with exactly what you just said now.
You can't
Well, I
say that, you
can't.
can call one of the people that are in the PTOs that you've spoken with and say, here's the list, I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm not feeling so good. Well, they should be outraged,
And I
and
think-
so in the days of the past, they were.
And I think to your,
You should speak to
sorry,
that
just
at
to
that
extend your point further, John, I think, informing people of what is forthcoming, or
Mhm.
potentially forthcoming, and making people aware that it will necessarily impact them, will motivate people to get out. That's the optimist in me, which is really tiny and speaking in this quiet voice right now, but I think that the fact that this will impact nearly every one of our school population.
Well, may not be able to advocate or suggest way to vote.
No,
Isn't
just
it just
informing folks.
information to say that unless it is voted no too low, this is what's gonna happen? Is that not a
We
fact?
can't say
We as a
No,
board not say that.
We can't say that.
That's not a fact?
So
We can't
as
say that fact?
the
We can as individuals.
As speaking on the PTOs, being president on the Grizzle PTO, we're not allowed to say, all I can do is this, I can say on our Facebook page, on our website, I can email people. Personally, it's hard because I wear a lot of hats. So I can say, if you agree with this budget, vote yes. If you think it's too low, vote no too low. If you think it's too high, so I can tell them how to vote if they feel something. I can say, this is what the Board of Ed has decided to cut, what the town has said. I'm not allowed to mention any personal view or anything, and nobody else can on my board. But we can post that, and we can share that information. Personally, Susie, whoever, can say whatever they want on their Facebook page, but we have to be very careful. So we're not allowed to voice opinions.
And whatever message we're gonna get out for the citizen articles, the letters, for example, has to be this week.
And we're getting one out
We gotta get it out
tonight.
this week.
So
or
we're
we'll-
Getting it out
Which I
tonight.
think you need to say the vote,
Right.
how to vote.
Right.
We need to be careful on that
But no,
one.
if you say, you can't do that if you just say, if you agree, vote
The
yes.
choices, the three choices.
These are your three choices, that's the way you have to put it, so
That should be
people
the way.
know how to vote.
Okay.
There's a parent group that's forming. The parent group that's forming is out there with a message, and they can speak on how to vote, because it's their
Because it's
opinion.
separate, yeah.
It's their personal opinion, and that message that they'll give on that, and whatever they're handing out, and whatever they're doing for calls and meeting, they definitely have a message, so I'm not aware of how large the group is. I know that the group has asked me to ask the mayor, he's not confirmed a date yet, that he's available to meet on the 24th of April at they would like an auditorium, the mayor's asked for a media center, so we're trying to, as long as he confirms that he can make that date, we have that at the high school media center, and then, need be to move.
Could we give a stage party?
I just wanna come back to exactly what Tracy said and how she put it. again, for citizen article or whatever, and obviously there'll be other things written, but is it not fact that in order to make the budget, these are the cuts that we have decided we need to make, and there will be a vote, the choices will be, and exactly how you put it. Is there something wrong with it? Is there any reason why we cannot say that?
Anything that we put in the past, anything that we've put out at this point in time has gone to the state elections board enforcement for approval. That usually takes a day or two to get that back. Because if we go outside of that, we face penalties, if you will.
But it's important to let people know what their choices are on vote.
They
We've done
have to,
before.
because you're gonna have people saying, I'm voting yes because I don't want anything else to be taken away.
Even though that's the logic, for me to send out last year, I sent out just the voting time and what day to vote. That was a concern, using, because it's a taxpayer system through school messenger that does that.
Okay, but we're not using taxpayer funds for anything if we put it on our own social media.
That's right, our own social media.
We can do it individually.
As individuals, you can do whatever you
Yes.
As
want.
long as you didn't gather the emails or the phone numbers through a taxpayer, that money that a taxpayer provided. So the taxpayers pay for our school messenger, so therefore you could use, but if it's your own personal, absolutely.
As long as you don't put Adam Selena, Board of Education member.
Oh, I never put that.
If PTO gained the emails on their own,
Frustrated.
not through the school, then it's different also.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get back to the citizen article for this week. I'm trying to be
It
very
has to be in
specific about
tonight,
it.
and we can't send it to get approved tonight and have it in tonight.
We're gonna get it approved, not through them, but we're gonna get it approved with someone else. So as soon as we get done here, there's gonna be a phone call made, the person's already expecting it, it's our attorney, we'll get it cleared tonight. That, whatever we wanna say, we'll get that cleared.
And again, we should say what the choices are,
I
because
agree.
walking into the voting booth and not knowing what you're gonna vote at, and what's gonna help the school.
Exactly, if you want this, this is how you vote, if you want this, this is how you vote.
But you're right, because people don't know.
I even said last, that's the last.
Right, that's the
Right, that's more specific.
You agree?
The other concern, to your point, though, Jake, is putting that list of budget reductions in to our position is a dangerous place because it locks us into those specific items. And if hypothetically, it doesn't freeze us into it, but it does tighten that noose in terms of that's the information that we put out publicly. Because if Brian gets 14 retirements next week, it changes the landscape of that tremendously.
True, but as of this moment in time, this evening.
But the argument could then be made, that, well, you gave me information about how to vote, which turned out to be inaccurate.
Yes, but that's why the budget hearing was inaccurate as well, because everyone came up to a budget hearing when people didn't even know what the budget was at that
I
time.
don't disagree with you, but
So to have a
the
budget
election
hearing,
commission.
hang on a second, to have a budget hearing before the council actually makes its final reduction is asinine. It makes absolutely no sense to me why you would have a budget hearing before you know what the actual budget is that you're voting on. So, process, the whole process is ridiculous. The charter change, the whole process is ridiculous. So that being said, as of this evening, those are the cuts. That is the information that we can get out there.
The other thing that's gonna happen is, we've identified these things, council's gonna cherry pick, they're gonna say, we're gonna give you $100,000 to put sports back in.
So
But they can't tell us where it goes, so.
as of today, that is absolutely accurate, and I think it's important to get out, and I just want to reemphasize the point that Tracy made. People are gonna walk in, you walk into that voting booth, you don't have no idea. Last year on the referendum, did it mention what the percentage increase was? No. It didn't even say that when you're saying, no, this is too high, it doesn't say what the percentage is. It doesn't say how much the increase was. That wasn't even there.
Right.
So there's no information as you walk.
And you're right, because every PTO meeting that I spoke at, the people said, we never knew this was going on. We never knew.
What was the increase for last year, that people were voting no on the 7%? It was like
1.3.
Yeah, 1.3. People said no, because you know what they saw? They saw the sign that said, ax the tax. They didn't see it was a 1.3% increase. So that information
Nor
needs
did
to
they know
go.
what that meant, even if they did know that it was 1.3, they didn't know what 1.3 meant as compared with other years or as compared with the needs of the, I don't think people.
I respectfully disagree. I think
You think people do?
1.3% increase is something you should know on. If you're gonna be voting up or down on an increase, you should know what that increase is.
You think that people who voted did?
I think they did not know it was 1.3.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
Because it wasn't on the slip,
Exactly what I'm
and if
saying.
we're not, I think we're, so it would have made a difference if they knew what they were voting on, yes.
If they knew what they were voting on.
Yes.
Right, people didn't even know how to read the ballot in terms of
Exactly.
what no or yes meant.
The reality is, if we're that we want voting, didn't vote.
Well, like what else I know is if the other political party actually advocated for the budget, instead of just staying silent the whole time, while one party voted against it, or spoke out actively against it. There were no pro-budget signs anywhere in the whole town. I didn't see a single one.
There won't be any this year.
I know. Because we can't put them up.
So, any more discussion on this evening?
Well, just to point that out, there's no pro budgets, but again, I don't think we're pro this budget either. so.
Well, I would agree with you. Yeah, no, I agree. But at some point, we have to be pro something. We gotta say, all right, stop the bleeding and vote yes on something, but we can't publicly, I get it.
Right now, we need. I can't say it, I guess. But, yeah,
Anybody
people need
else?
to understand like yes and no votes. I mean,
Yes.
In this paper, the citizen's gonna come out 5 days or so before the referendum. The referendum's on the 30th, isn't it?
30, yes.
So it'll come out about whatever that Thursday, Friday, 25th, I think it is. So its timing is right to get the message out there.
And the parents plan to have a small card that talks about how to vote and what the vote would be.
Oh.
They also plan to be at the polls. So that's something new that hasn't happened before in a long time. So I don't know how large this group is, but I'm getting different phone calls from different parents daily, wanting to know, wanting to ask questions and things. So at least some of the efforts of getting the word out and the news articles, people are starting to become more aware. How many? I won't tell.
So what else can we do as a Board of Ed to get the word out? So even
Stand at
if,
the Stop and Shop picketers right now.
Nobody's going there.
You can go for prescriptions, I did find out, by the way.
Just question, so you mentioned this parent group. Is the parent group advocating to support the budget or to vote against the budget? So, I mean, again, we're talking about getting the word out, I'm not sure what the word is.
There's a phrase that Tracy's aware of. Go ahead, Tracy, you can share it.
No too low,
but my,
Vote no, too low is their catchphrase.
and they're gonna be getting the word out.
so if I'm correct, maybe I'm not, even if it comes back, no, too low, they don't have to give us any more money.
It's
Right?
advisory. It's posted as an
They
advisory.
don't have to, but the point is, before you started saying no too low, you were saying no and there's more cuts. That's a given. But no too low gives the Board of Finance a chance to review it, it goes back, and what are we elected for? All of us are elected for to represent what the people are telling us. We used it
Oh,
for
Board of
the.
Finance.
Needs to represent the 7%.
Yes, but the Hubbard school vote, you listen, if I see the vote, it doesn't, it can't, it's gotta be a tourniquet if it's vote no too low.
Mhm.
It can't be, the Board of Finance did not put forward the budget that's now going to the people.
Is the Board of Finance allowed to advocate? Or they
Individual.
decide that,
We're
you
no
know,
more able to advocate than you are as a board,
right, that's what I meant.
but.
As individuals.
But certainly what has been done in the past, when things were done like this parent groups, the asking of the mayor is a polite thing, but there were, you remember when the graduation outdoors was?
Oh my gosh.
going on? There were meeting in people's houses, many people would go, and you can go to those as an individual.
Correct.
But the point is, the groups that are trying to get the message that you want sent need the information as best they can get it. And if those groups are looking for some information from on the Board of Ed's operational budget. I'm the member of the Board of Finance that liaises with the Board of Ed. I'd be happy to speak with them. And I think the last part was what I said in the beginning. If it stops here, we're all screwed. We have to find a way that reasonable people in elected positions can do the best thing for our town, and we're not doing that.
We're not doing.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. I think that's what you're saying. Council may disagree, but the whole point is a discussion in a room full of people that are elected is far more binding than somebody sneaking around and talking to the police chief, or that's what we think they're doing. It's got the transparency. The notion is, we're not in a good position as a town. And if the answer was, we can't tax our way out, well, we can't make the tax so low that we get deeper in it. But we're not having that discussion. We're saying, I can't do it this year. We gotta do something to get rid of the bonding. We gotta do something to say, what's the reasonable rate of increase for the Board of Ed and for the town? And we're not gonna do it this way. The problem is, when I said that to the town council, they said, hey, we tried that, it didn't work. This is a lock you in the room until you come out with an answer kind of a thing, and we're reasonable people. We have to believe everyone that was elected has to be put to that standard. And thank you for letting me speak.
John, I think you know that this board is pretty transparent. We invite Board of Finance here, we invited the town council here, they have not attended one of our meetings. Board of Finance, we always have the liaison, but they don't attend and then say that we're not interested. I don't understand that, but.
They say that they don't understand the budget and they won't come to the meetings, and they don't try to look at facts and figures. We need more numbers to be shoved in front of people to say, how are we gonna make this work? This doesn't work.
No, you never cut your way to
And it's-
success.
And it's risky. You're absolutely right. It's like my hair is being pulled out. You know, the whole notion of institutionalizing a Board of Education, I'm crying when I see this. This isn't what was built to then fall apart. It wasn't what got rebuilt to fall apart. And it's unfortunate that it has to be cyclical, but maybe, like the cicadas, we can come out every 13 years and get the damn job done. Fear the cicada. That's not gonna be a good enough slogan, but.
Do I have a motion?
Adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, do I have a second? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
8-0, we're adjourned. Folks, thank you very much.
Email
This was
to
not.
me, or you have